Hello and welcome to the 10th episode of Deep Space Wine. I'm Kat, a deeply sheltered bod who is watching Deep Space Nine for the very first time, and I'm bringing my 21st century perspective to this 20th century show. And this is Tim, a long-time viewer of Star Trek who brings his deeper knowledge and love of the show.
Good evening.
And today, sorry Tim, today we will be talking about Season 1, Episode 10, The Nagus, which was first broadcast on the 22nd of March 1993. Content warning, there's very little content warning this time. There'll be a little bit of discussion of anti-Semitic stereotypes from me. There is a plot to commit murder and one explosion in the episode, but there's nothing graphic in terms of sex violence or language. So now over to Tim for a summary of the episode.
Thank you very much, Kat. And yes, as always, we thank those editors of Wikipedia for whom we recycle the episode description from. And this is, yes, the Nagus. Zek, the Grand Nagus of the Ferengi Alliance, arrives at Deep Space Nine and seems to take an interest in Quark. He tells Quark that he wants to use the Quark's bar for a conference, where he announces that Quark will be his successor. The Nagus then dies, apparently making Quark's appointment permanent. Quark has a hard time adjusting to his new position, but he becomes popular amongst the Ferengi entrepreneurs by giving away lucrative business opportunities. Zek's son Krax and Quark's brother Rom attempt to kill Quark and are stopped by Zek, who appears before them very much alive. Quark's appointment was a test to see how his son would respond in his absence, and as Zek says, "You failed miserably!" Quark congratulates Rom for having the lobes to try and kill him. Meanwhile, Commander Sisko is trying to cope with the friendship between his son Jake and Rom's son Nog. This problem is seemingly solved when Rom orders Nog not to attend school. However, Jake and Nog begin spending even more time together. Jake will only tell Sisko that what they're doing is private, but in the end, Sisko finds he has nothing to worry about when he finds Jake teaching Nog how to read.
Oh,
very quick summary.
Just going to note to you, Tim, apparently we've just come up. The video wasn't working. All the way through your summary, they could hear us but couldn't see us.
Oh, I do apologise.
Distracted by our visages.
That is me trying to find how OBS Studios will pick us up whilst I look at other things on my computer and not show you what I'm looking at on my computer, because nobody needs to see that. That's a very private thing. But we are back now, so sorry about that, and I will attempt to ensure it stays that way for the future. So, what we usually do is we run through the episode, scene by scene, talking about what we like and what we don't like. But I don't know if you have anything top of the list you want to cover off in this intro sequence.
I think just my overall impression of the episode was I really enjoyed it yet again, 10th in a row.
I keep waiting for us to horribly break this run, and you just absolutely hate an episode so hard it puts you off the rest of the show. I really hope that doesn't happen. There's got to be one.
The first one that I hate, I'm going to hate so bad.
That's what I'm worried about.
This one was tremendous fun. It's got some great guest cast in it, in the Nagus and his helper Mayhadu.
Mm-hmm.
And just so much great character work around the Ferengi. Not auditor, not animator, not assessor. Peeps who help us in the chat.
Oh, sorry. I think we call them the ensigns, don't we? Our tech support, our backroom boffins. Whatever.
One of our kind ensigns, Indoor Cat,
yes.
Is very fond of the Ferengi and absolutely adores this episode. And imbued me with some of the enthusiasm for it. So yes, I'm looking forward to going through it and saying what I thought about all the different bits of it.
I'm really glad to hear it. I also enjoyed it as well, and as regular viewers will know, the Ferengi have several episodes throughout DS9, and as always, I'm trying to preserve Kat's not ignorance, newcomer nature to DS9, so please do hold off.
It's 30 years old and I've not bothered with it, so I'm perfectly happy to describe it as ignorance of the show.
Oh, well, that's very accommodating of you, Kat, but I think it's best for you to react like you've seeing it for the first time. I think that is the true gem at the heart of a good Star Trek podcast. Our unique factor is that you have never seen this before, so I'm so keen to have you experience all of these for the first time, so I can't wait to get stuck in. And the episode begins with the brilliantly made up Mayhadu, peering through one of those lovely big chunky DS9 airlocks, and he and a Ferengi. So it's Cracks, the Ferengi first, and then he ushers in a robed figure and Mayhardo and a possibly tall alien. Wonderful. Who is this robed figure? Well, we don't know, but the camera focuses in on a staff with a golden Ferengi head.
It's such a beautiful prop.
Isn't it gorgeous? It's a beautiful prop, and the camera follows it coming through the airlock. It ignores the characters and it follows that coming through the airlock, and I just think that's it's a great way to show off a good prop and really I just think it's an explosive intro. I love it.
It's a really powerful cold opening. It's got intrigue. It's got new characters. It's got a kind of alien we haven't seen before in Mayhardo. And absolutely gorgeous prop work.
Absolutely. Love it. They come onto the promenade, but before anything can happen, we cut to the Sisko's quarters. And Ben would like to take Jake to Bajor for the Gratitude Festival. Which we may have heard mentioned before, but is a big kind of event in the religious Bajoran calendar, I think. And they want to also visit the Fire Caverns, a geological attraction on Bajor, which is going to set up, I think, the longest payoff in Star Trek history. That's going to become very relevant in about 7 seasons' time.
Oh my god! Check out Fire Caverns.
Nothing more will be said. Nothing in chat, but I want to see if you remember this when we get into DS9's final season, and if it triggers a memory that this was mentioned in episode 10, season 1. But we'll say no more about that now. But it's another great scene. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I love scenes between Jake and Ben. They feel like a real family, a real father and son. And Jake is this teenager who doesn't really want to hang out with his dad. He wants to hang out with his new friend. They want to see a ship arrive, I think. An Andorian freighter, is it?
Yeah, I think there's an Andorian freighter which is carrying new grav tractors, anti-grav tractors. Right. So they wanted to see one. But yeah, I really like the relationship between the two of them. I think it would have been very easy for the writers to have decided that the relationship with Jake was going to look so different from Sisko's relationship with the rest of his team by having someone who could always oppose him, who wouldn't be on his side, who would cause problems for him. And they're not doing that. There are some issues that come up between them in this episode, but they're handled in such a non-toxic, non-conflicting way. They're a really warm pair of people to watch, and the affection between them is played out beautifully by the two actors.
It really is, as is, I think, the friction, which is very believable in a teenager looking to kind of stretch himself and, find his new identity with his friend rather than, bounce off his father. And I think every father, presumably, I have no knowledge, but every father always likes to think, oh, my son is always the child. I look after, we play... all of that. So it's so believable that they would have this developing relationship, which I don't think always came across in TNG. I don't think they had a lot of time to develop those interpersonal relationships, and especially not like a familial. I know there was like Wesley and Beverly, but...
And there was Worf and his son Alexander.
Oh my god, right,
Very infrequently.
Yeah.
It's kind of mocked by many fans as being a terrible father-son relationship because they just don't have one. And Worf never adjusts his attitude when with Alexander versus when he's with adults.
No, absolutely
so
not.
So this is a bit of a tonic to that, I think. Sisko is a really warm and loving father, and we get to see I think we get to see quite a different side of him when he's with Jake.
100%.
Yeah, in this scene, when Jake says he doesn't want to go down to the planet, it's his choice. Ben doesn't try and bully him into it, doesn't try and blackmail him into it. There's no, well, we haven't spent any time together recently. It's just, okay then.
Okay, yeah, and it's just like a kind of... a wry acceptance. Oh, I guess my son's growing up and he wants to spend time with his friends. And that is explored throughout the episode as well. I think that development of Ben realising that Jake is becoming an independent now and is quite capable of looking after himself, which I love.
Sorry. And one thing I wanted to note, at the start of this scene, Jake is picking up various pads, PADDs, the school. Effectively, they're there instead of school books to show when a student is getting ready for school or doing homework. They will have personal access display devices.
That's
because I think they hadn't they need something on screen to show that he's preparing his schoolwork. They can't just have, oh, it's in the computer. When I get to the computer terminal, I'll pull it up. So we've got these slightly clunky props which stand in for textbooks. But he also, when pulling those up onto his bed, he pulls out a basketball glove and ball.
Yes, he does.
And that appears at various points throughout the episode and becomes a bit of a visual symbol for the relationship between Jake and Cisco and the distance and the closeness between them.
That's really interesting because that baseball in particular is going to become very central to Ben Sisko's identity.
Yes. I suspected it would, because in the very first episode he uses it to emphasize the importance of linear time to the prophets, showing that competition for fun, and that the not knowing what's going to happen next in a game of baseball is how human life is, and it brings excitement as well as danger and risk.
100%. Yep. Well, they laid the foundation there, and that will pay off throughout the show. Another great example of how DS9 takes an idea and runs with it and builds it into their world. And we've all that to come. But yeah, in this episode, it does turn up a few times. But we're jumping ahead, and I don't want to get too far ahead. So I'm going to note there as well, in Nigel in chat, he's pointing out a very regular complaint about Star Trek and pads, which is, why do they have so many? Why isn't everything just on one pad? And you've got to think, it was 1993, and back then, the thought of a small tablet computer, which we now take for granted, was exciting technology, and nobody ever thought there might be more than one thing on that tablet. So each tablet represents, as you say, one book.
I guess the idea of one little screen containing however many hundreds of pages of book, that was a huge amount of data in those days, whereas now in the days of gigabytes, terabytes, it is as naught. So yeah, they're working with what they have, as well as having that nice trope of carrying a pile of books, which they can then drop and someone else can pick up, or which Nog can then build into a platform.
Yes, I love that scene as well. You're right, I love it. It does. It works very well as a very physical prop in a show which can sometimes get a bit lost in special effects that you can't actually touch. So I like it.
And leaning over a lot of computer screens, there's a lot of plot explanation comes out of people leaning over screens and reading out readouts. So I think they do well to avoid that sometimes.
I would absolutely agree. So I'm going to move us on to the next scene, which is in the bar. And Quark is pouring a drink for a woman and saying, customer service is our priority, which seems a very strange thing for Quark to say. And we found out that that's because Rom returned this woman's lost purse rather than keep it, which, as we now know, is rule 1. And what is rule 1, Kat?
The first rule of acquisition is, once you have their money, you never give it back.
Yay!
Which Quark makes Rom recite to him. And I love the way that Rom says it, as if it's something that he's been schooled in since he was a boy.
Absolutely, 100%, which we later learn he was. All good Ferengi were. We both researched this and found that this is the first proper episode that the rules of acquisition are mentioned, and they underpin, Ferengi culture.
I don't know if it's the first time they're mentioned, but it's definitely the first time they're given numbers and specific rules.
Oh, sorry, yes, that's absolutely right. Yeah, because I think they've been referred to previously. Like they might have even been mentioned in the pilot. I think when Sisko and Quark are negotiating him staying, and there's
it feels like a familiar phrase, the Ferengi rules of acquisition. I think it's referred to like their charter or their system of government. But yeah, we haven't had anyone give numbers to them yet. We've got a couple of them in this episode, which I like. It's fun. I'm looking forward to having more of them. And when Quark calls over Rom after giving the woman back her money pouch, he calls him a worthless, tiny-eared fool.
Which Kat, in our setup, pointed out is very built into Ferengi culture. Their ears are very significant in many ways in terms of respect, of acumen, of prowess, of many things. And as I pointed out, they're also an erogenous zone, so they also play a parallel to human genitalia in all of their cultural references, which I find fascinating. And one of the things I love about DS9 is that it's so good at world building. So this is something we're learning about Ferengi culture. We might not want to learn that, but we are learning it.
And it does gesture to a bigger world and to the way that their culture is formed differently from ours. They're so ear focused because their ears are always there. Yes. They're very prominent.
Yes, Absolutely.
And I really like the way that Armin Shimon kind of toys with his, because he probably can't feel when he's touching it against his head, but whenever he's thinking, he just kind of strokes the side of his enormous prosthetic ear.
And it is, as you say, not something he can feel, but it feels like such a natural thing to do. You believe. It really takes you into it. I find it very believable and compelling that he's doing that. And just like, yes, of course.
There are a few places in this episode where the use of gestures by Ferengis really do, as you say, world build. They point to a culture that isn't just written down on paper. The actors and presumably the crew and the director have thought about how they're going to make these people live on screen. And
it's brilliant. It is brilliant. So I have next, we have a shot from outside the bar, looking down over the promenade and focusing on something that we both independently clicked on.
Apologies, Tim. There was one little bit that we've missed.
Let's snip back.
That after Quark has told Ron that he's a worthless tiny eared fool, and as punishment for having passed over the pouch back to its owner, he's going to polish every rail in the establishment.
Absolutely right.
Tonight. Ron then wanders over into a corner of the bar where Nog is sitting there building a little tower out of his pads from school.
Have we not all done this?
Rom shouts at Nog, who then knocks them over. And Rom accuses him of being indolent and says that as punishment for sloth and indolence, he's going to polish every rail in the bar tonight. It's just nice how the hierarchy works.
Yes, that's the only trickle down I will believe in. That's what trickles down is punishment and work. That's what trickles down. But we're not going to get.
It also sets up that Rom is sitting there playing with his books instead of reading them,
instead of doing his homework.
Yeah, which we'll return to later in the episode.
Exactly.
But yes, the next scene.
Shot over the promenade. Now, we've talked about this many times. We love good camera angles that take advantage of the fact that the promenade is one gigantic set that's been built and you can film it from any angle. So they filmed this one down past the weirdest goddamn looking thing I think I've ever seen, and that's Star Trek. So I'm going to pop it on the screen now for everyone's benefit. But there is this enormous, I think it's meant to be a fish. Sorry, it's a little bit grainy, as we've said before. Obviously, DS9 recorded onto film, as Kat pointed out last time. So we only have these kind of low resolution screen captures to it with. But you can make out that it's quite an intricate prop.
Yeah, and we don't see the entire creature, but it looks as though it's the head of quite a large beast. It looks a bit like an ichthyosaur or an iguana, maybe some kind of lizard. And the camera lingers on it for a moment, pans past it, and we never see it again. And I don't know if it'll turn up in a later episode.
I don't think so.
No, I suspect there was probably a prop from another show that they thought, how can we make this place look more Cardassian? Great big skeleton hanging from the ceiling. I even went to look up because it's been there reminded me of the blue whale in the Natural History Museum in London. But the blue whale wasn't installed until 2017. Up till then, it was just a standing diplodocus. So it's not a reference to that. It's just a giant hanging skeleton in a mining station. Maybe it's a creature that used to prey upon the miners and they put it there as a ward. I just don't know. I don't know what to make of it.
It could have been put up after the Federation arrived and it's just some kind of Bajoran cultural thing.
Oh, good point.
Or it could be a menu for some alien restaurant. We just don't know. And I think in itself that can be some good world building where we have no idea. It's just something going on in the background of the station. Another story that we aren't privy to.
And another glimpse of what it's like to be someone boarding the station and seeing alien artifacts around you and not understanding everything that's there.
Yes, we are taken in much like a visit to DS9 and we're like, what on earth is that thing hanging from the ceiling? And don't worry about that. Go to the bar. Okay, no worries. I'm not worried about the giant alien skeleton in the ceiling. But yes, a beautiful prop. And we cut from there to see our hooded figure, a Ferengi and a very tall alien, approach Quark's bar and come inside, where Quark is regaling Morn
Morn!
with a very convoluted joke, which he has to explain a couple of times before Morn begins to laugh.
I think we join him just at the punchline, and Quark saying, and so the Andorian says, "Your brother? I thought it was your wife." And Morn just looks very confused, shakes his head a bit. And Quark goes, I thought it was your wife. Oh, he bursts out laughing. And I think it's the first time we've heard a sound out of Morn, because he's been ceased at the end of the bar a few times.
He has. I think, yeah, it is the first time he's properly interacted with, and I can tell you from the notes, it is the last time you will hear from Morn.
Seriously, that's the only time Morn uses his voice.
That is the only time Morn uses his voice. I don't know if that counts as a spoiler.
It makes this a very special episode.
It does. It does. As I said that, I thought, oh, maybe I shouldn't have said anything. But yes, there you go.
I can believe it. I also liked that the joke was about Andorians, because we've heard in the first scene that it's an Andorian freighter that's going to be arriving. So there is reason for Quark to be telling that particular joke. It's all tied
together.
Lord of String in the background. So planned meticulously. It's beautiful.
It's good writing. It's good writing. Actually, mentioning writing, I did just want to flag up as well. This episode was written by Ira Stephen Bear, who was a previous TNG writer and had joined DS9 as a producer, and would later go on to very great things with DS9. He will become very, very important in the show's running later on. But this is an Ira Stephen Bear episode, and as a result, I think you will find that he is a great writer. And I think he's a great writer and a great producer. He's very good at DS9, and I think that really shows. So I just want to give a very early shout out to Irish Stephen Bear. Yay. So the joke is over. Morn gets it. I guess we don't, because we missed the rest of the setup. But the Ferengi approaches and says he's looking for Quark, and Quark doesn't turn around and says, "You've found him. Who's looking for him?" And it is Crax, son of the Grand Nagus. Everybody looks round, Mehadu whips up the hood, and it's Zek. What's the most deep-fried Ferengi we've ever seen. Lobes the size of deflector dishes, just hair everywhere, more wrinkles than, a sand dune. Beautiful
it's fantastic.
Makeup.
It's the first time we've seen a very elderly Ferengi, and they've really gone all out on changing that face to make it look old. I just say he's got kind of cotton wool-like hair coming out of those enormous ears. It looks crispy as heck. It's incredible. It's just such a beautiful makeup. And it successfully hides, I think, until you hear his voice, the fact that it is Wallace Shawn, who's playing the character, who is best known, I think, from The Princess Bride and also from My Dinner with Andre. He's a great character actor, and he does fantastic work in this episode from beneath layers and layers of makeup.
Absolutely. I think in that massive prosthetic, there's like a tiny bit that's actually his face, like his eyes down to his mouth, and he emotes through it so well. You are utterly ensnared by this frankly grotesque character, but he is so compelling, and just that wonderful Wallace Shawn reedy nasal voice. It's spectacular, and there it is. It's the Grand Nagus, essentially Quark's ultimate boss. He's the merchant prince of the Ferengi Alliance. He is essentially the closest thing they have to a ruler. So obviously Quark swings round.
I think first of all he actually grabs Morn's arm in panic.
Yes, he does.
Next moment he's still facing towards the camera and away
he
from
doesn't
the Grand Nagus. And when Crax says it's the Grand Nagus, Zekers grabs Morn and Morn. It's just, I think the physicality of all of the actors on set is fantastic. They're very much responding in character, and it feels very heavily choreographed for all of them. The way that Wallace Shawn holds himself as Zek as well, he leans heavily on his staff, he's crouched, he's playing an elderly, decrepit character. And yes, I just tremendously enjoy watching them every moment they're on screen.
They're so good. They are so good.
Yes, as you say, Quark turns around and he quickly kisses the gold head of Zek's sceptre.
Does that happen before the titles kick in, or?
I believe it does. Yes, it does happen before the opening titles. Credits are after this scene.
Because it's such an important thing. It's clearly a cultural observation, much akin to the kissing of the ring of the the papacy. It's the same term of respect. So I just think it's really important to note that is something that they do, and I love that they do it. So I'm glad we picked up that it does happen for the first time there. Brilliant. And then it's that famous Zek giggle that takes us into the titles, isn't it?
Yes, I think his grandson says that. Oh, Quark asks, "Is the Grand Nagus here on business or pleasure?" And
Oh,
Quark
that's
says,
right.
Is there a difference?" And then says that the Nagus is interested in trying out the holosuites that he's heard so much about. So Quark offers a pad that has a list of 5 of his favorite games on there. The Nagus is free to choose, and his son, without consulting him, just says he's decided he will try all of them. And at that point, he starts giggling.
That's right, he does. Oh my God, what a
He
brilliant!
hasn't said anything yet. It's just giggled horribly. It's beautiful.
And yet, it's one of the most powerful impacts of the first time somebody's turned up on the station. I think you are immediately just entranced by this absolutely incredible alien. And I
think the fact that Quark clearly defers to him as well, because Quark bows to no one.
Oh, absolutely.
But yeah, this man, he's immediately venerated / he's afraid of him.
Yeah, he telegraphs utter subservience.
Yes, absolutely.
Which, again, I got the feeling was again more kind of cultural, like political, as well as just being like, yeah, the guy's the boss, but it's like a reverence for a very respected elder in their society. So I really liked that kind of that way that he portrayed it. In a way, you're right, he's never shown to anyone else. He doesn't respect anyone else, So I really liked that. And then yes, holosuite programs, and we will get into that in a little bit. And roll titles then, I think.
Yeah, from the hideous, high-pitched to the beautiful opening music. A moment of calm before the chaos commences.
It's going to be chaos. You're absolutely right. And then I think the first scene after the titles then is the schoolroom.
It is, where chaos is in full swing.
Back to the chaos.
Keiko hasn't returned from Earth yet. Her husband has, and he's taking the class. So he's the poor substitute teacher who walks in to see children sitting on their desks, kneeling and leaning over, throwing things at each other.
Chaos. Absolute chaos.
It's just your standard schoolroom full of kids who are not interested in learning yet.
Not at all. And I do wonder as well, where the hell does Chief O'Brien find time to teach a school day, considering he's like, trying to keep the station from falling out of the sky?
And of all the characters who are qualified to do it, O'Brien isn't the one I would point to. I was trying to think, and I was thinking, Kira doesn't have the patience for it, nor does Odo. Dax would probably be excellent at it, because Dax, I think, is used to speaking to people of different ages with respect, and she's able to offer information easily. She's a science officer. She would have been a better choice, and as you say, she doesn't have as many calls on time as O'Brien, who's got to fix everything single screw that falls out of the station.
Yeah, plus as we find out, Dax has experience with children later on in this episode. We find out that she's been a parent. So it does seem a little bit strange. I wonder if it's more that the station sees the school as kind of like the O'Brien's pet project, and therefore they will look after it, which seems a little bit unfair.
Yeah, that's a very good in-world explanation. I suspect it's to give O'Brien something to do in the episode, where rarely there aren't any technical problems aboard the station. It doesn't revolve around anything going wrong or anyone sabotaging anything.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right.
Yeah, I suspect he's there to replace his wife to remind us that they both exist.
I think you're probably right. Also, I noticed in the notes from Memory Alpha, the Star Trek wiki, thank you, wiki gods, this is O'Brien's first appearance since going off for a few episodes when we had Lieutenant Brimmin.
Yes, that was another thing I was glad of, that if O'Brien hadn't been back, would they have shoved Primmin into the classroom? Because I can't see that working.
I mean, great guy, good security officer, great guest star.
We love Primmin, but he can fuck off. Look O'Brien.
Yeah, he's no O'Brien, he's not. So, yeah. And so we bid a unmentioned farewell to Lieutenant Primmin, who, I don't know, it's just never mentioned again. It's one of those TV show things where, well, we were trying out this guest star, it didn't work out, so let's just pretend that never happened.
Oh, I'm sorry he doesn't come back again. I did like him. I liked his burgeoning relationship with Odo.
It was good, and they had good friction, and it would have been great, but sadly not to happen.
One thing I really liked about Colm Meaney's entrance to this episode is that he's walking into a classroom full of children, and the writers still gave him technobabble to say. He has to walk in while juggling props, looking around a busy room, saying, the transporter in ops needed a minor adjustment in its open molecular imaging scanner. I just thought, poor Colm must be cursing out those writers. He could have had one episode without any of that bollocks. And what do? They make him say it in a loud space.
Not only does O'Brien suffer in the show, but the actor suffers outside the show. That's what we're saying. I caught part of an interview the other day where he was being interviewed, possibly with Graham Norton or something, and he does mention that, you know, it was the hardest part of doing Star Trek was the ridiculous things the writers expected him to say, and he was like, yeah, all that shite they made me say. And I was like, yeah. And that's why they make you say it, because it's clearly such a burden. And yet, Colm Meaney, excellent professional actor, goes at it with gusto and delivers these technical terms in his wonderful, you know, soft Irish accent, and just makes it believable, you know.
He does. He delivers it with conviction, even though it's 80% meaningless.
And thank you also for noting down the exact words he said. Kat is trying to reduce the amount of notes they take, but, you know, please, you'd have to write down every line of dialogue. Please give yourself a break.
Oh, and I did a bit of background research on this scene, because there's a screen behind O'Brien that has a diagram of an alien in cross section.
I'm going to bring that
up. And I wondered what the heck that alien was. So I found someone's blog mentioned it, nightlyemma.com.
Nightlyemma.com, thank you.
Has very kindly gone through I assume has gone through quite a few DS9 episodes, and in this case has identified the two aliens on the screen behind O'Brien as Korob and Sylvia from the original series episode Cat's Paw.
What a wonderful cameo appearance from a very, at this point, quite an older show, but about 30, 60, 70, 80, 90, about 40 years? 63 to 94?
Gosh, it was a good long while, but I really like that the set designers, the prop people, have mined the old show for that kind of thing. They thought, what can we put in the background? We can design new stuff, but we can also look up what else is in this world. We've already got a world full of aliens and creatures. So yeah, they choose aliens from the older world, and they create new designs to show of them, and yeah, it's just very, very charming.
It is. I do know from previous Star Trek experience that a lot of this is the set designers, who included the lovely Doug Drexler, who spent a lot of time designing a lot of props and working in the special effects department of TNG and DS9, and I think Voyager. And they loved doing these little things in the background, these little Easter eggs, we would call them now, but they would put so much fun cameos into the panels, the information screens, not thinking that anybody would actually ever have such a clear view of it, that they'd be able to look it up. It was
because people have been watching on smaller screens back then.
Precisely, at that lovely grainy film vision. So I think it was more done just for the love and the fun of it. Doug's on Facebook, and I would encourage people to follow Doug Drexler on Facebook, because he talks a lot about the time he spent working on Star Trek and his various other special effects experiences in Hollywood. He's a funny, compelling guy with just a treasure trove of information. He designed this panel along with, I think, Greg Jean Jr., I think. I'm going to hazard a guess that it was the other special effects guys who worked with him. And they create so many of these, so we will have to make a habit of looking out for other panels that we can see clearly in DS9, because they will always have little Easter eggs like that in them.
Oh, thank you for naming the people who made it. That's delightful. It's lovely to know who did it.
They do deserve the recognition, and also it's just a lovely thing to go and like follow Doug and hear him mention, I found in my archives that time I worked on like a DS9 episode and designed this panel, and there it is. Hooray! So yeah, check him out. But we're getting off topic.
Yes,
O'Brien
the scene progresses with O'Brien says that the old student's assignment was to write an essay defining the term ethics.
Tall order. So
he's going to pick on someone to presumably read out their assignment. He picks on Nog.
Sliding down in his chair, not wanting to be picked.
And Nog says that he doesn't have his essay. O'Brien asks him why that is. And he says that Vulcan stole his pad.
You're telling me Vulcan stole your homework? Beautiful line. Top 10.
And O'Brien asks him, any idea why? And Nog replies, because they don't have ethics. Perfect. I feel that he's met the point of the assignment there. Give him the grade.
Such a clever answer. And it does show you that, Nog is not stupid. He just lacks facts. He's clearly an agile-minded young man,
Yeah, yes. And the other kids in the classroom absolutely love that. He's playing up to them. But Nog is clearly in trouble for not having done this. He therefore says, well, ask Jake. Jake was with me, obliging Jake to lie as well. So
Quite
Jake
the
initially
ethical conundrum.
It is rather. So Jake initially looks a bit uncertain, but then eventually says, yeah, maybe, I guess. You guess? Yeah, I was there. They took his pad. I saw it.
And it is...
Not get him in trouble.
And I think, again, although we always distinguish Star Trek into A and B plots, I think there's a bit of mirroring there that people are obliged to kind of lie and go out of their way and do unnatural things for other people. This whole episode is about throwing people out of their comfort zone and making them jump through kind of ethical, moral hoops to try and, look after themselves. That just pops into my head there that, Jake doesn't want to lie, but he cares about his friend. And, we see a lot of kind of relationships being tested and people's positions with regards to their fathers or their friends being changed or their brothers being changed and tested. So it's
and also cultural norms being brought to the fore as well. The Ferengis acting as Ferengis do, and an Earth person-led classroom expecting a Ferengi to respond as an Earth child would.
That's a very good point, actually. I hadn't thought about that. Yeah. Once again, it's meant to be the Federation embracing of other cultures, but yeah, we are putting Nog through the expectations that the humans, I would think, would have, not Ferengi. It's not very accommodating of that other culture, so very interesting.
Yeah, but yeah, that's a nice reading of it. The A plot and B plot both having mirroring themes. It's lovely.
Thank you. I try. I would also just like to flag that when we look back through the classroom behind Jake, we can see another display at the back of the screen, and that one has Enterprises on it. We can see.
Oh, lovely.
We can see 5 starships, which are clearly visible as the Enterprise D, C, B, and the 2 A's, Kirk's original and Kirk's refit constitution for the movie. So again, another well-designed panel. Thank you, special effects department. So.
Good on them nerds. Oh, can I describe the next scene? I've been horribly from our position down in the bar. We can hear the Grand Nagus giggling in the holosuite up on the mezzanine.
Oh God, yeah. I mean,
yeah, I think it was you who mentioned. Unusually, we had a watch through of this one before recording this, and it was you who mentioned that there are horrifying implications to the lack of soundproofing in the holosuites. Can we hear everybody who's in those rooms at all times in the open bar where everybody gathers? And seriously, props to Wallace Shawn for his laughter, because he must laugh for a good half minute to a minute without stopping. Must be doing circular breathing, so you can just hear the niggas throughout this scene.
Yeah, it's a constant background sound. And also, you've got to think, what is he doing in there to be triggering all of these giggles? Clearly, there's a man who can do many things at once. We don't want to dwell on it. We don't want to dwell on any of these concepts because, as we discussed previously as well, we are really establishing what the holosuites are for. We are so far away from TNG's holodecks recreating history. Oh yes, You
can take a horse ride. You can go skiing. Now that the holodeck is for sex.
Yeah. I mean, there's no dispute at this point. Everything. It's not explicitly said, but every single part of this, everything before the intro was, these energetic programs that might not be suitable for an elderly gentleman. I mean, it's just blatant adult material, and it is an astonishing concept that I think again distinguishes DS9 from TNG very, very firmly.
I'm glad that they were willing to go that far, because there are some themes that I often hear the name Rick Berman being bandied around that he didn't want to touch. He didn't want to have same-sex relationships, certainly early on in DS9. So I am willing that he and the other producers are willing to cede some ground on this and say that, adult things happen. People have sex, and it is a trade that is catered to.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's it as well. It puts the line under TNG, flagship of the Federation, every Federation high moral, great. DS9, a Bajoran station, a free port, a wretched hive of scum and villainy, if you will. It draws a line so clearly that you are on the Federation frontier, you're not in Federation space. Different things are allowed out here. Things that may be a bit shocking, a bit dark, but are just part and parcel of normal life. And they don't try and hide it. They don't try and moralize it. They're just like, it happens. And you take away from that your own impression. Do you think it's good? Do you think it's bad? It's up to you. That's wrong. You're going to sell it. People are going to buy it. You make your own decision. And I love that.
It's a good point. There's never any discussion with Cisco or any of the other management teams, that sex is being sold in the holosuites here. There's no discussion of it. It's just acknowledged that is what they are for. That is what happens. That is what the patrons want.
And it is given to them. And, perhaps that will come up. I'm not going to say whether or not it comes up or not, but it also gives you rich, fertile ground to explore. What's the moral impact of that? What's the ethical considerations? I'm turning in an essay for O'Brien now. What are ethics in Star Trek? Who knows? You can build a whole episode out of it, though. And that will be fun. And all of this has hopefully gotten us away from the thought of Zek enjoying our holosuite program. But you're right. We're back in the bar, and Zek's in the holosuite. Take us away, Kat. Please.
Quark anticipates that the Nagus has come. Oh, yes, he's talking to Rom and saying that he's worried that the Grand Nagus might have come to purchase the bar from Quark. It's effectively a forcible takeover to buy it from him for a fraction of what it is worth. So Quark is nervously sitting in the bar waiting for the Nagus to come out of the holosuite. When the Nagus does leave the holosuite, his son Krax offers him a glass of orange drink and he's holding the jug in the other hand. And the Nagus just takes the huge jug and takes a huge drink out of it. Which is lovely. The man is very dehydrated after whatever he's been doing in there. And the first words that the Nagus says in the episode are, "Good program."
He does so much for so little. I love it.
He does. And then Krax emphasizes that the Nagus needs to rest, so Quark offers his own brother's quarters for him to stay in.
That's that momentary hesitation was, I offer my own, oh God, I can't take him into my home. What else can I do? Impose my brother. And I think just Rom lean forward and go, but.
It looks very uncertain, but he doesn't say anything in front of the Nagus.
That's right.
And Quark invites him to stay for as long as he wants.
100%. And then he says, is there anything else I can do to make your stay more enjoyable? And then Zek just says, invite me to dinner.
Perfect impression. Yes.
Thank you. It's such a beautiful voice. If I do it 1/10 the honour it deserves, I will be a proud person, because obviously that Wallace Shawn.
It's a great impression. Well done.
Oh, thank you so much. What a voice. What an incredible voice this man has. And I love it. I absolutely love it. And so dinner with the boss tonight. And I have the next scene is Ops with O'Brien and Cisco.
Yeah, O'Brien's hip deep in the floor fixing something, as is his more natural state. They fall into a conversation. Cisco asks how school is. Yes. Miles says there's nothing the kids like better than to take advantage of a substitute teacher. He always did. It's a bit of a sitcom trope, but it's very true to life, if my memories of school are right. And then Miles gives some parenting advice to Cisco, saying that if Jake were his son, he would find a friend for him other than Nog. Yeah. And that Nog's a bad influence. And I love Cisco's reply. He appreciates the advice, Chief, but I trust my son. Yeah. Besides, if I get between them now, it would be me versus Nog, and I'm not going to force Jake to choose between us. Miles asks why not, and Cisco says, because I'd probably lose. But I like the lack of authoritarianness there. He's speaking to another member of staff. He might have even pretended that he pulls rank on his son sometimes. He doesn't. It's just, no, I'm not going to force him to make that choice, partly because I think I would lose versus his friend. I don't have that kind of power over him. But also unspoken, I think, just because he doesn't want to force his son to make that kind of choice. He wants his son to be happy and to make his own decisions.
I got exactly the same. Actually, I didn't even get that far. I simply thought that Cisco was very perceptive and realizing that his son is now a teenager, wants to spend more time with his friends, and would choose them over an overbearing father. But you're right, absolutely. He would not want to, as you say, pull rank on his son. 100% he wouldn't. But I loved it. I absolutely loved it. It was so believable, so perceptive, that Sisko as a father would be like, I can see what will happen here. And I can't do that as much as I want to say, you don't want to hang around with that boy, he's bad news. That will drive him further too. Nog, because we all know that is what would happen. We've all been teenagers. We've all been told not to do something. Been like, well, now then I will do it because you've told me not to do it.
Again, the writers avoid that trope of he's an incredibly capable captain, but he's terrible as a dad.
Right?
How is he going to resolve it? No, he's actually a really good dad.
He's actually a really good dad. He's a really good dad. And without wanting to be blunt, it's the 90s. He's a black man and he has a son. And it would be very easy to play into some very tired racial tropes, but they don't. They show that Ben Sisko is many, many good moral things. He is clearly a good moral person. He's responsible for his son, just like he's responsible for his station. And as you pointed out at the beginning, he keeps them separate as well. He does not treat his son like a member of his crew. He wants to be a good father. He wants to spend fun time with his son. And he doesn't want to forbid his son having certain friends because he knows that'll fall apart in his face. It's so believable. It creates a rounded but, moral character that is both an upstanding Starfleet captain and a believable human person. I love it. I just think it's so...
he's so likable, and I appreciate that. Might change over time. He's got a lot of seasons in which to do stuff that I'll find objectionable, but I really like him as a person. He's very, very warm when he needs to be, and knows how to toe the line with his stuff when he has to.
100%. Quite away, I think, from Jean-Luc Picard, who spent a lot more time focusing, I think, very much on being the exemplar Starfleet captain, statesman, archaeologist. Picard is very much invested in the things he does, I think. And he fully considers it his duty. He's a very duty, career-oriented, moral man in that direction, that he believes he subsume Picard the person to Captain Picard the role. I mean, you've seen a lot more TNG than me, so I would be interested if you think that's...
Oh, very much so. There's one scene in particular. We saw Vash in the episode with Q earlier on in our run of podcast.
Yes.
And there's an episode where Vash has already met Picard. She comes back to see him again and discovers that he hasn't told anyone aboard about the affair that they had. He hasn't mentioned her to anyone, including Beverly Crusher, who he meets for breakfast most mornings.
God, yes.
So there is a lovely scene where he walks in and finds Vash and Beverly talking to each other. But there is also a place where Vash confronts him and says, you haven't told anyone about us, have you? And he says, well, a Starfleet captain has to keep his private life separate from his working life. And she says, is that a Starfleet regulation or is that a Jean-Luc Picard regulation?
Oh, perfect.
And he has to tacitly admit that, this is him being stuck up and stuffy and not wanting anyone to get close to him. And Sisko is very different in the way that he is, I think. Because he's very close friends with Dax, and that keeps being brought up. He still refers to her as old man
100%.
At the end of nearly every scene they spend together.
He does. He's clearly, he talks parenting with O'Brien in the scene we were just discussing. So I think he actually has that personal relationship with his command crew that Picard, I think, they built very gently towards the finale where he actually joins the crew for their poker game, which he never did before. Because, I think they were buying into that Starfleet captain, commanders are lonely job trope, and they've just completely swerved it with DS9, which I really like.
Yeah, same. But back to the scene.
Please.
I like
off
that
these tangents.
Before that scene ends, Miles laughs at the idea that Jake might choose Nog over him and says, I doubt that, sir. And Sisko says that that's because your daughter is 3. Wait until she's 14. And the scene ends with Miles looking a little bit, oh no.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just a nice observation. They don't have kids of a similar age. Miles is the father of a 3-year-old, and he's probably her whole world. It isn't going to be the same when she's a teenager.
It's so believable again. I love it.
But yes, the next scene is Mehadu, Quark, Krax, and the Grand Nagus. I think they're still in the bar at this point. And it opens with some chopsticks moving towards what look like mealworms. They are live wriggling grubs.
Yes.
And it's Mehadu who's about to pick one up and try one. And they're damn cowards. They cut away and they have They don't have a clean shot of him lifting it and eating it. Presumably the actor, whose name is Tiny Ron.
Tiny Ron, yes, who plays Mayhardu.
Brilliant. Mayhardu, it probably goes without saying, is about 7 foot tall, or appears it next to the Ferengi in the cast at least. But yeah, he picks one up in the tongs and then they cut before he lifts something else to his mouth. And he's tasting the food before the Grand Nagus will try it. He's testing it for poison and suitability. And yeah, the Grand Nagus says, "My compliments, Quark. These tube grubs are chilled to perfection." But it raised for me the question of where the hell have these tube grubs come from? Because we know they're not replicated. The replicators can't create living food. They can't create gach.
No.
They can only create dead gach, which Klingon will turn up his nose at.
Yeah.
So presumably Quark is either farming them or has managed to get them aboard the station somehow. I can't help but feel that he would have got them on the black market, because I can't imagine Quark doing anything that wasn't illicit.
I would 100% agree with that. And I would also say that not so much got them on the black market. Quark is the black market on DS9. It all comes through him. But yeah, I think we've mentioned this in previous episodes, this Star Trek basically debate versus, replicated versus real food. And as you point out, excuse me, it won't do certain living foods, and we could clearly see very, very visibly that the tube worms were live, they were wriggling, they were clearly happening. So yeah, you've got to assume that in this kind of post-scarcity culture, which Star Trek is, that yeah, you could replicate any food, which means actual real farmed food or imported, however, that must have an extra degree of appreciation, a certain cachet. This wasn't even replicated. This is from fresh.
Chateau Picard from real vineyards in real France.
Exactly, grapes actually squeezed, not replicated, like in the medieval times. So there is clearly this appeal for fresh food, which kind of makes sense, yeah. If everything is replicated and indistinguishable in flavour, you've got to seek out something else for the gourmand, surely.
Yeah, so it makes sense that this is the food that Quark gives to the Grand Nagus, a visiting dignitary. It brings out only the best, the finest, the rarest, the most difficult to get, the wriggliest.
What a beautiful concept. But Kat did observe to me very accurately that they have a wonderful table set up in this scene, which, as I will continue to refer to it, the Space Lazy Susan, which I will pop on screen now for everyone to appreciate.
I love this so much. I love the idea of a Lazy Susan, but it's got 3 layers to it.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, it's kind of called attention to in the script. The Nagus complains when Quark turns it to get food for himself that he hadn't finished yet, so Quark has to turn it back around. But yeah, much like the board that the Wadi were using to play Chula in the last game, it looks like quite a big piece of kit. I don't know whether it'll turn up again. I hope that it will, because it's just lovely. It looks like you've got savouries on the bottom, and then maybe drinks in the middle, and then probably desserts up top under the glass dome. I'm
squinting at this tiny low resolution image, and I believe that they look a bit like French fancies, but obviously not in space.
Ferengi fancies.
Ferengi fancies. I love it. My only worry is I'll bite into it and it'll be full of tube grubs. But that aside, I'm sure it's delicious. But you're right. Again, the DS9 production staff have created a wonderful, quite complex prop that's going to be seen for about, I think the scene's not more than about 2 minutes long, is it? So it's on screen for about 45 seconds. And
it's just there to serve to us the notion that this is a special occasion. He's a special guest. They're not just sitting around eating from ordinary bowls. They've got this big, expensive-looking setup for him. So it's a lovely thought, and it's very nicely carried out.
It does. It looks brilliant, and it sets this great scene for Zek to go into more detail about what he's thinking about. And the main thing is he ran into, I think, Quark's cousin.
Yes, his cousin Barbo, who had been imprisoned and had recently been released for a crime that he committed with Quark's help. They sold defective warp drives to the Tarahongian government, and then Quark ran off with the profits while Barbo was imprisoned. And here we get the next stated rule of acquisition, the 6th rule of acquisition expressly states, never allow family to stand in the way of opportunity.
Brilliant.
So the Nagus praises Quark for having the instinct, the ears, to open a bar before the stable wormhole nearby had even appeared. That's a good instinct to be there even before it happened.
Yes, Cracks, I think, reasonably points out, but he didn't know. And Zek does say,
Makes it all the more impressive.
Again, brilliant voice delivery. Wallace Shawn would be proud.
I have a horrible voice. It's great.
No, you don't. You do a great impression. So thank you for that, Kat. And it's such a ludicrous scene as well. Cracks makes a very, very valid observation.
Absolutely.
But you start to, I think that is sowing the seeds that the Nagus clearly looks very fondly on Quark's business acumen and very poorly on Crax's. And you're starting to see there that there's the seeds of the storyline. The Nagus is not proud of his son, who would be heir apparent to the Grand Nagus.
And who lives his life subservient to him, speaking on his behalf, leading him around. His life is wrapped around his father, and his father doesn't have much respect for him.
And again, now we're stamping into the core concepts of the episode, which is relationships between sons and fathers.
Yes.
Rom and Nog, Ben and Jake, Cracks and Zek. So, setting the tone very interestingly here. I like it.
And we actually move on within the scene there. The next thing that comes up is that Rom he asks if he can leave the room so he can study for school. Yes. So Cracks asks about him attending a human school, and he's told that he's attending a school led by a human female. And because Cracks says, human female.
I love the way they really stretch out those detestable words. I love it. And I think when somebody mentions homework or school, I think somebody actually drops a fork and it's just a comical silence. Oh, cringeworthy.
Yeah, I love that they're bringing home the idea that to the highest of high Ferengis, the idea of a Ferengi boy being schooled by a human female is abhorrent to them. Why the heck would you allow that to happen? So Rom, just in a fit of his own subservience to the Nagus, says that no, he'll never attend there again. Rom, go to your room. No studying.
No studying. And you know what, actually, I think as well, Aaron Eisenberg, who plays Nog, actually visibly looks upset about that. He does not want this to be happening. It's such a little Star Trek thing that this guy actually wants to. He wants to go to school. He wants to improve himself, and he's not being allowed to. And I just thought that was such a tiny but plaintive little moment. You know, that Nog is clearly upset about this, and that obviously informs the rest of the episode. It's very sad.
It is, and he's got no space to complain at that point. Jake would be able to remonstrate with his father if he wanted to, whereas partly because of the kind of relationship he has with Ron, partly because the Nagus is there.
Oh, yeah.
He can't. He just has to go to his room and feel sad about it.
It's a very grim situation, unfortunately. Again, that is, I think, a theme running through this episode. These are kind of expectations that fathers place on sons and kind of trying to steer them in a certain direction. It happens in microcosm right there. And it's about, what do you do with that when you have an expectation placed on you by your father? Star Trek finds out.
And when you're in a culture within a culture, when you are a minority culture within an overall Federation and Bajoran space, trying to hold close to your own culture while finding your own way. I think that theme is quite well explored in this episode with Nog, Rom, and the others.
Yeah.
But this scene ends with the Nagus saying that he wants to hold a conference about the Ferengi future with regards to the Gamma Quadrant in the bar tomorrow at 9 a.m. sharp, with Quark there to host. And the next scene is in Ops, where Kira and Cisco are discussing the Ferengi ships which are arriving. And it's at this point that I started to look into some of the stereotypes that might surround the Ferengi. When Kira says that there are a lot of Ferengi ships arriving, her advice is to lock up the silverware.
I immediately bumped on that line and thought, I actually made it in my notes. It's casual space racism, It
absolutely. I actually wrote down that it would feel racist as all hell, but given that Ferengi culture is very proudly acquisition focused, it is true to how they've met the Ferengi and how the Ferengi present their own culture.
This is it.
But I did I've written here, I was worried that the portrayal of Ferengi sometimes veers close to some anti-Semitic stereotypes.
100%. Yeah.
They're coveting wealth, their enlarged facial features.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't have to look very far to find this addressed online. In fact, in the Wikipedia page. I can research more deeply, but when it's there for me and it is cited, I don't feel the need to on this occasion. Robert Hewitt Wolfe, who was a writer for Deep Space Nine, has stated that the creative team, several of whom were Jewish, were aware at the time that many already saw the Ferengi as Jewish stereotypes, but that they would attempt to mitigate this both through characterization of Ferengi characters as individuals and through incorporating aspects of multiple human cultures into Ferengi culture.
Yes.
And I find it very reassuring that the writers were aware of the possibility, and rather than just denying it and saying, well, that wasn't our intention, so you're not going to read that in it, they decided that they were going to try and make sure that it was their responsibility to produce a show that wouldn't be materially harmful to any minority, including Jewish people. And from what I've seen in DS9 and from people I trust telling me how much they love the Ferengi in this show as it progresses, it genuinely looks to me like the writers and cast have successfully avoided what could have been a one-note stereotype with the Ferengi. They were at risk of being an anti-Semitic stereotype, and they're not, certainly as time goes on. And I think in this episode they feel distinct. They feel very distinctive. They are their own culture, their own thing. And if there's any stereotype that they meet, it's Earth capitalists of the 20th century in their selfish pursuit of the acquisition of greater wealth for its own sake and at the cost of anything and everything except for wealth.
100%.
So yeah, I think I feel, having watched this episode and having read into it that little bit, I do feel a bit more relaxed about enjoying the Ferengi in the show. I feel happier about how they are already. But what are your thoughts around the Ferengi and stereotyping, how they appear as a race in world?
So we've discussed the Ferengi a few times in that they were introduced in TNG, whilst the TNG writers and producers, goodness me, we've lost Kat. Well, that's never ever happened before. I am gonna ask for your patience whilst we see if we can regain Kat. Can you hear us okay, Kat?
That was me trying to see if chat was saying anything and clicking the wrong button.
That's absolutely fine. Do not worry. It was just a little bit unsettling because you suddenly disappeared. This is the problem. We are using our computers to communicate, but we also want to keep an eye on chat. Chat, thankfully, is remaining quiet, no doubt engrossed in what we're saying. But thank you for checking in. No problems. Glad to have you back. As Nigel points out, technical difficulties, please stand by. I will get made up a technical difficulties sign. I think of Brian looking frustrated.
The next time I click the wrong button.
Or me. It could happen to any of us.
But yes, I apologise. I had asked you about your own impression of the Ferengi.
Yeah. And I just want to say thank you. I think you negotiated that very well. And it is also worth bringing up. We will not, I think, shy away from when Star Trek doesn't live up to the standards it sets itself. I think as people are reviewing the show, it is beholden on us to face it with a clear-eyed view. One of the things we like to do, obviously, is to look back at a show written and made in the early 90s and say, well, how does that stand up to 21st century values? Whilst understanding that obviously it couldn't, but we're not going to hide away from things such as painful stereotypes. You can absolutely extract certain things and create a negative stereotype from the Ferengi. But as you have accurately pointed out, there is so much you would have to discard from how the Ferengi story is told, especially in DS9. They get a lot of specialist episodes which explore so many different aspects of this culture that, you could not say, oh, well, this is just a one-note take on some very lazy, very tired, very racist Jewish stereotypes. So I am quite happy to say that DS9 does not fall into that trap. But I think it's also beholden on us to keep an eye out and to fairly raise up and say, actually, I don't think this is fair. I don't think this is accurate. Because, as I said earlier, it was written at a time when we weren't so critical, we weren't so aware, and we weren't so challenging of certain tired, lazy stereotypes that inform creative writing like they do everything else. And I do think that this episode, it is one of the first kind of story building, world building for the Ferengi, and I think in many things we're meant to read it comically. We're meant to say they just have taken, as you correctly say, 20th century capitalism to ludicrous extremes. You know, the rules of acquisition themselves. You can't build an entire society around these kind of cruel laws. You can't take that seriously. That's absurd.
I do like this episode for observing how relationships are carried out among Ferengi, how business deals work when nobody trusts one another, when they're constantly trying to one-up each other. But it's also nice that we've got the relation, not necessarily the relationship between Rom and Nog, but we've got Nog's relationship with his world, with wanting to attend school, with also working at the bar, with trying to please his parent and fit in elsewhere. I think that works as a good counterpoint to the greedy Ferengi, which isn't a stereotype so much as a cultural given for them as a people.
This is it. I think we're being asked to say, well, you know, the Federation, and we will literally cover this point, but the Federation is meant to be accepting of other cultures. In Ferengi culture, this mercenary acquisition of wealth is not seen as outstanding in any way. It's not viewed as an overwhelmingly positive or a negative. It's just the way it is. And therefore, the Federation is obliged, ethically and morally themselves, to accept it in Ferengi culture, another sovereign star nation. You can't make a judgment on it. You've just got to accept it. So it's interesting. And to take us right back to the beginning, you point out that Kira said, lock up the silverware. It's Sisko who says, in a very placating tone, I don't think we need to go that far. But he does call up Odo. So I do think like they were trying to have it both ways, and they're like, you know, no, you can't just write the Ferengi off as thieves. But incidentally, where's Constable Odo?
And he doesn't have to say anything very much to Odo. He just says, about all these Ferengi visitors we're getting. And then Odo just responds, I'm already on it.
I'm already on it. And there he is.
The implication that they cannot be trusted.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely love it. And yes, I have, Odo glowering from the promenade, top level, you know. So, but we will always keep this, I think, in the forefront of our minds, because it is very integral to how we want to run this podcast, which is to interrogate this show in those values. Can I also point out as well, another segue, but Robert Hewitt Wolfe is on Tumblr and is incredibly approachable. He has an ask, very similar to how Neil Gaiman is on Tumblr. You can just put asks to Robert Hewitt Wolfe on Tumblr and he will just answer them. So in future, perhaps if we have enough prep time, we will have to put a question to Robert and ask him, if he wouldn't mind providing an answer that we could use on the podcast. He was a writer on the staff of DS9, and he would later become, I think, one of the producers. So he becomes very involved in the show running. So thank you very much for doing the research, Kat, and we will have to rely on Robert Hewitt Wolfe more in the future.
Yeah.
Please.
Details.
Take us forward, because I know I'm segueing dreadfully.
The next scene is in Quark's bar, which has once again been repurposed. This time it has a long table in it with many Ferengi in attendance. The table is fantastic. And just again, that great window, the one that you've used for our standby scene, is, it looks fantastic. It's great use of the space. And the subtitle at the start of this scene describes the background noise as genial conversation.
Oh, does it?
Which, there are lots of Ferengi milling around, and they all sound quite happy. They're just glad to be there and excited about the business opportunities that might fall out of the meeting. At the very start of this scene, Krax complains to Quark that two of the Ferengi who've been seated next to each other are bitter enemies since one of them bought out the other's business interests.
Right.
And it doesn't come up again, but it's just a nice way of putting in there that actually there are problems between some of these people. They're not all best of friends, they're competitors.
That's very, I think, again, integral to Ferengi culture. You don't get to sit at the top table with the Nagus if you aren't an absolute mercenary. An amoral, backstabbing, acquisition, hungry, Ferengi with great lobes for business. And that will mean including throwing people at this table under the bus, under the table, under the runabout.
Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, Quark is obliged to throw out his best patron. Morn tries to walk in for his daily shift of sitting at the bar, and Quark physically pushes him out of the door because the meeting's happening. Where does Morn go when he's not in the bar?
I made the same note in my notes. We've never seen Morn anywhere else on the station. He is literally only ever in Quark's.
He exists there.
You exist here. If he were to go to the wormhole, he would not have anywhere else to go. He does have quarters, presumably he doesn't sleep at the bar. But yeah, it is. I think it's seen as both a light-hearted moment, but also an indication of how serious this is. That even Morn isn't allowed. Crack says, I was led to believe this is a private event. Wow, it's serious enough that Quark will turn out a reliable customer like Morn. Serious business.
And a Ferengi says of the Grand Nagus that he'd better show his ears soon, or I'm leaving.
And Crack says,
for the whole person.
Crack says nobody leaves until the conference is over.
Yes. He also, the same Ferengi accuses Crax of living in his father's shadow, to which Crax replies, the Nagus casts a very long shadow. Careful you don't disappear in it. Which is such a good line. God damn.
Thank you. I'm so glad you spotted it. I made the exact same note because we've seen several comic moments so far, and then suddenly Debbie hit with that, which is actually, a believable, credible threat and beautifully delivered.
And it differentiates Crax from Rom, I think, because both of them are Ferengi living in the shadow of greater men. But Crax is willing to threaten people. Crax he has a mind and a determination of his own in a way that Rom doesn't appear to yet.
Not yet, but he's getting there. But it is such a wonderful line. And it's setting up, I think, what the writers intended, which is that like it or not, the Ferengi are, often on the darker side of the grey moral code, and they are, as I believe this episode was originally pitched from the notes I recall, a criminal cartel. And, as we learn from this conference, there is a lot of shady, underhand business practices that are probably seen on the less legal side of the spectrum. I think there's just no way around it. And so it's such a credible criminal threat from Crax, That's
it is, yes. I firmly agree. There is a short cut to a balcony on a corridor where Jake and Nog are sitting with their legs dangling, just sitting at a corner looking at each other. And Nog tells Jake that he doesn't have to attend that boring school anymore, but it's very clear from the way the actor delivers the line that he's feeling angry about something. So Jake asks why Nog is getting mad at him, and Nog says, because you're a stupid human and I don't know why I bother with you. And he storms off. And I think the two young actors do such a good job of showing that kind of petulant, childlike, I can't tell you precisely what is on my mind right now. I'm going to get angry with you instead of getting angry with my father, the overall culture, the big things I'm dealing with. It's easier for him to dismiss his friend and try and cut off that part of his life. And both the young actors look and sound upset about it. It's a very sad little scene. It is.
And it is sad. I feel the sincerity comes through. And Jake says, you're the one not going to school. Who's stupid? And, I also... Nog doesn't reply to that, but he clearly looks a bit wounded on his face before he leaves the scene. And I again, you get the feeling that actually Nog's trying to balance it. He's trying to attend the school, but he's also trying to be a good Ferengi. And he's got that identity tear, that pull towards two conflicting identities, but he does want to. And I think, doesn't Jake say, like, we've never had any trouble about anything to talk about before? Or is that later on?
I think that's a later one.
Yeah, it is.
By something Cisco says.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So I'll leave it until then. But yes, it is clearly such a painful tear between these two characters who've been good friends so far. I love it. It was such a tiny, short little scene, but very integral to both their characters' development. Really enjoyed it.
Yes. And we're then back in the bar at the conference. And the Nagus raises the issue that no matter where the Ferengi go in the Alpha Quadrant, their reputation precedes them. A reputation tainted by the lies of our competitors, who maliciously spread the erroneous impression that we are not to be trusted. And I was like, seriously, you're really going to pretend that while you are cheating everybody, it's a lie that they tell one another that you cheat them?
I wondered about this. I was like, do they actually believe that, or are they literally saying it for their... why would they...
It's hard, isn't it? It does feel like a lie that they tell themselves to bolster themselves and to get future business if they pretend to themselves that they are honest. Pretend that they don't. They know that they're constantly cheating people. So it was a very strange thing for him to have said.
I thought it was strange. I did really. I just couldn't. I couldn't understand if they wanted me to believe that the Ferengi believe that about themselves, or if they are just parroting their propaganda, like in some kind of like communist, post-Soviet, ridiculously overblown stereotype. The party provides. Oh, there are no queues at the bread store.
Are good.
Right. I don't know, and I wonder if that's left open to our interpretation.
But it does, that is in there so that it leads into his emphasizing that the Gamma Quadrant does not have the same shortcomings. That they don't mention the Wadi, who Quark has already met and already cheated.
Yes, a very
nice
good point,
impression, Quark.
That's such a good
yes, the Gamma Quadrant offers opportunities to meet races who haven't yet been sold short by the Ferengi and might therefore be interested in doing business with them. And two of the delegates have a short response to this, which is, our word can be our bond until we decide to break it.
And that's immediately gone back on what they've just said. I mean,
this is one of the points at which they are just comedy characters. We're meant to find what they're saying laughable and visible and inauthentic, but it does play strangely in terms of what we're meant to believe they believe about themselves.
Yeah, I do think you're absolutely right, and it is meant to be comic. It is meant to just be, we say one thing, but we really mean another. Fine, absolutely. But I also bumped on that, where our word could be our bond until we choose to break it, and everybody cheers around the table, and bang, 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 and then it's that opportunity to gas up the Grand Nagus, who will lead us into this new era of prosperity. The Grand Nagus.
What's new, little father? But the Grand Nagus declines. He says, I've grown old, the fire's dim, I'm just not as greedy as I used to be.
Line.
Which is sent as, oh, of course you are. More so. But I like this bit. He says that he's already chosen his successor. One of the Ferengi at the table starts licking his lips avariciously. He's going,
I love those tiny little physical. I missed that, but I can absolutely believe it because they're so physically expressive, aren't they?
The actors worked really hard to strive through that very thick makeup. They've got a teeth insert in the front of their mouths, which gives many actors a slight lisp. They've got much of their faces immobile because of the prosthetics that are attached to it. So they're all acting their asses off, and you can tell it's wonderful. The Ferengi next to the one who licked his lips is Krax, who, when the Nagus says that he's chosen his successor, Krax starts pulling his shirt together and standing up. And then the Grand Nagus says that he's chosen Quark, who isn't even at the table. Quark is standing facing it. Once again, Quark is facing the camera and not the Ferengi behind him. So we can see him looking shocked and then delighted. As the other Ferengi are just in uproar, say, we won't stand for this. One of them shouts, he's a lobeless amateur.
Lobeless amateur. What a great line. And again, you pointed it out. Ears as a symbol of prowess in Ferengi culture.
Acumen, bravery, any good quality, the ears can be there to be present as.
Lobeless amateur is such a good line.
It's wonderful. And they're all shouting things like, I won't stand it, and this is outrageous, as they leave. And the Nagus then tells Quark that he knows he'll do a wonderful job. And the scene ends with Quark looking delighted about this.
And is he stroking his ear again, I think?
Yeah, I think he does it that point.
Again, the question of if the ears are erogenous, what exactly am I looking at here? But no, we don't dwell too much on that. It's just a sign of a Ferengi being, cunning, culturous,
pleased with himself.
Exactly. Fine.
The next scene is Sisko and Jake having breakfast in their quarters. And Jake is just sitting there stirring his porridge with his spoon without eating any of it. So Sisko asks if it's lumpy again, which is presumably an indication of replicator problems, which constantly crop up. But Jake just explains that Nog's dad's taken him out of school. He says, it's unfair. Nog can't even read. Why has the boy been asked to write an assignment, to create an essay?
I wondered about this as well, and I don't know if that was an oversight or a late addition, because obviously it informs a very later scene in this episode. So I don't know. Because at this point as well, Nog's been in the school. I think, several months have passed. Possibly coming up on a year?
In world, I can imagine that he's forgotten his homework, not done his homework, had Jake help him with his homework enough that maybe it would have been nice if the seeds had been planted in an earlier episode, if we'd seen Jake passing him a copy of his homework, say. But as you say, it may just be that they came up with the idea of Nog being illiterate within the episode as a way to resolve the B plot.
Yeah, that's my suspicion. Yeah, it might just be a slight oversight from the writers. But not able to read at this late point seems a little odd, definitely.
But yeah, Jake and Ben are discussing this, and Sisko's very balanced. He says that Jake can still get together with Nog after school. And Jake tells Ben that Nog has said that humans and Ferengi don't get along, and Ben replies, well, usually they don't. Jake says, but you're the one always saying that we should make friends with other cultures.
Love it.
And I wrote down Ben's response. I believe that, and I'm glad you believe it too, but human values and Ferengi values are very different. We've never been able to form a common bond. And it's interesting. It's a very honest assessment from Ben, as well as being very pessimistic about the possibility of Jake and Nog having the friendship that they want to have. It feels as if he's not going to blow smoke up the boy's ass, but he's also he's not trying to put him off, but he's trying to be honest about the lie of the land. Yeah,
I did find it. Yeah, I wasn't 100% sure how I felt about Ben's not positive view, and I think Jake's right to say, but you always say we should try and be friends. And I wonder if it's more to telegraph this kind of maybe even unconscious bias amongst the Federation and amongst Starfleet officers, which is just to view the Ferengi with suspect, because they've never tried to engage. They've always been notorious for their criminal doings. It's the heart of their culture. They see no reason to change, which is understandable. So the Ferengi have therefore, so the Federation have therefore adopted this policy of, well, that's the Ferengi.
That's a very good point. Yeah, and that's the culture in which Ben lives, one that has never been able to get along well with the Ferengi. They are viewed with distrust. The officers in Ops will happily talk about how little they trust the Ferengi as an entire race. So yeah, Sisko is steeped in that, whereas Jake isn't. Jake has a friend who is a Ferengi, and he's the first Ferengi that he knows. And he's very upset that friendship looks to be ending. And Ben isn't able to comfort him at that moment.
Exactly. And I think that is kind of part of the heart of DS9, which is putting cultures together that don't normally work well together and making them try and work together. And I wonder if it's Sisko kind of slowly getting to grips with that. He's like, oh, actually, maybe I do. At this point, he's not. He's just like, well, I am worried about the influence this culture has on my son. And I, as you say, I'm a career Federation officer. I've been trained to view the Ferengi with suspicion, Every time they turn up in the TNG, they were hostile. They were meant to be hostile. They were hostile to the Federation. So I think, if anything, it's actually the show setting a challenge for itself. Okay, we've said this about the Ferengi. How can we get past it? How can we see them somewhat differently? It's going to be interesting seeing how they resolve this. Oh, yes, and I see in the chat there, yes, Nigel saying, maybe Nog narrated his reports into his pad. It's
a good point. We can assume that the computer understands human commands. Presumably it can take narration. So, yeah, it's a really good point.
100%. Well noted, Nige. Cheers.
And this scene ends with Ben asking if Jake would like to play a little baseball after school. And I've written, it's being built in for something. I know it. There's a reason baseball's in this. So
on it. You're on it.
But Jake says that he can't. He has something to do. He's very mysterious. Ben doesn't press him on that for plot reasons and because he's a good parent. He just lets Jake go off and plan his mysterious plans. And the next scene is with Quark, Grom, and Graal, who's one of the Ferengi from the conference. And Quark is promenading in his purple Nagus.
He literally is.
And I like how he's been given the sceptre to hold, and he holds it very differently from the previous Grand Nagus, Zek. Zek leans on it because he's old. He uses it as a support. Quark is just there waving it around quite jauntily. He just loves having it and showing it off. It just feels like every moment Armin Shimerman is on screen, every action is very well considered for the character.
It is a testament to him as an actor that he's like, how can I best convey everything we need in this scene? How am I physically presenting? How is my voice? How are my emotions, my face? You know, he's great. He's great. Armin Shimerman puts so much into the role and I'm sure you're learning by now why Quark is such a standout favourite amongst the fans. He's well realised rich character, and this is such a good show. I made the same notes as well. He is proceeding down the promenade. Oh, it's brilliant. It's just brilliant. It's so him as well. You know, yes, I'm finally receiving what is my due right as leader of Ferengi.
Very much so. There's no question about whether he's right for the role or not. It's just, I'm enjoying this, damn it. But Growl leans into him once they walk and offers to protect Quark from his political enemies among the Ferengi. Yep. As long as Quark gives him his pick of the business opportunities in the Gamma Quadrant, and Quark very nervously asks, what if I refuse? And Growl puts an arm around him and squeezes his shoulder while saying unsmilingly, you won't. And threatening music plays, and Quark continues to look anxious. And it's suddenly clear that he's completely out of his depth in this role. He wasn't prepared for something like this to happen. In Rom's quote,
I was just going to say, and I think it ties into what we've already seen many, many times, which is Quark as a coward. I don't think it's wrong to observe that fact. You know,
that's a fair assessment. He's not
a brave.
He's got a lot of bravado, but no bravery.
Exactly. He will do the right thing in a pinch. You know, like rescuing the station during the Babel virus. You know, he did help, but all the time he was screaming over the intercom to Odo, "You've got to fix it! 10 seconds! Odo!" And you know, just absolutely weeping fear. So. It's believable.
It feels like a very believable, well conceived of character. He has a lot of base confidence, a lot of bravado, but when you dig underneath that, he can't fight. He wouldn't try to fight to save his life. He'd beg people not to kill him before attempting it.
Exactly. I mean, look at the last episode. You know, the blubbering and falling under the table.
Which to be fair, was his effort to try and save some of the command staff, possibly for fear of what Odo would do to him.
I think massively through fear of what Odo would do to him. Absolutely. But again, that's his go-to place is abject cowering and grovelling, I think was the word they used in the last episode. So that's the Quark. So it's believable that Grohl would put the hard sell, as I put in my notes, on Quark and
that Quark would respond by being terrified and shocked that this is happening.
Absolutely. Which he does, and he takes his fears to Zek.
He does. The Grand Nagus, Zek, and Myhadu are in Rom's quarters, and Quark walks in and immediately tells Zek that he's in desperate trouble, and Zek is just planning his holiday.
I love it.
Asking whether she should go to Belasny, where the tides create harmonic sounds which produce wonderful hallucinations, or to Ricer with its voluptuous females. I like that they've thrown in Ricer again, because it appears in a handful of Next Generation episodes. Notably, there's one where Riker is introduced to a computer game which nearly results in the destruction of the Enterprise, because everyone gets so obsessed with it that they stop doing their jobs. It's a very heavy metaphor for modern technology. And there's also one where Picard meets hot archaeologist Vash. So Ricer is a place where you go for pleasure. And Quark anxiously tells Zek that Grohl has just threatened his life. And Zek laughingly replies, so he's the first, is he? He won't be the last. Quark just hasn't thought about what this job actually involves.
Right,
he wasn't aware that he might be under attack from other Ferengi. He just wants the opportunities that it brings.
So Ferengi. Again, it's a crude, ugly stereotype. But yeah. Quark only being interested in the benefits and having no concept of the threats, the dangers, seems very on brand.
Yes. And Zek counsels him to surround himself with loyal men, but not too loyal. Never trust someone who places your prosperity above their own.
That's such a Ferengi value.
It is, and it's a lovely kind of fine line that Quark has suddenly got to tread. Find people that you can trust, but who won't save you. if it's not in their own interest.
Because then they're not good for Ferengi. Yeah. Oh man.
It's a complex series of rules they have to follow. And the last thing that Zek says is, "When in doubt, be ruthless." And then he just stops moving. He closes his eyes and just sits perfectly still. And Quark starts prodding him and saying his name and looking panicked. And Mayhardin comes over and looks in Zek's face and then just shakes his head at Quark.
Quark shakes his head back.
Didn't do anything.
I didn't do anything. I love that Quark's first impression on the death of the leader of his culture. I didn't do anything.
It is clear that Mayhardin was there to see that Quark didn't do anything. There's no question that there was foul play involved, which is where it could have gone.
100%. I don't know if you noticed, but it's just visible at the bottom of the screen that Zek's hands come up in front of him like this.
Yeah, it's kind of puppy dog style. I think he was holding the pad, and
he drops the pad, and his hands like kind of. And he looks like a cartoon dog who's died in a cartoon. It was just bizarre, but very believable.
It's a good way of showing that he looks stiff and dead.
Yes, that's exactly what it is. Just a bizarre scene. So there it is. There it is. Zek is dead. Long live Quark.
Yeah. And the very next scene is Grand Nagus Zek's funeral. No beating about. The Ferengi are haggling over small containers of dark green dust, which turns out to be the remains of the Grand Nagus.
Unbelievable! I wish I had a picture as well, because I love it whenever a show does this. They have the big memorial picture, which I think it must be an American thing, because I'm not kind of massively familiar with it in kind of British funeral
I've never known it here, but whenever there's a TV funeral in an American show, they've always got a big, huge, very nice looking portrait of the deceased. Yeah, you're right. They have that there.
Shouldn't laugh, but I love to see it. And then yes, the little green canisters. But we don't find out what they are until after the conversation between Quark and Rom. And Quark has a job offer for Rom.
Yes, Quark hires Rom as his bodyguard because he's the only one left that he can trust.
But Rom! Rom?
I don't think Rom's any better at fighting than Quark is. If anything, probably worse.
Exactly my impression.
But yeah, there's a brilliant bit where Quark does a dramatic spit take of his drink when Rom says that he's glad to be given the role of bodyguard, but he'd assumed that he would be allowed to run the bar now that Quark's the Grand Nagus. And Quark spits drink everywhere.
Proper spit take. I love a proper spit take and proper belly laughs as Rom scuttles away.
Yeah, and Quark has a very similar laugh in this episode to the Grand Nagus. But yeah, closing his eyes, laughing, Rom just skulks off in the background, and Quark suddenly stops laughing when Odo wanders up behind him. I don't think Odo even looks at him; he just intuits that Odo is there.
They have a connection. There's nothing else for it. But yes, Odo suddenly appears and says, "Was it something about clearly you're very." Oh, is it sorry to intrude at this very sad time? Like
yes. Yeah, and Quark immediately starts kind of dabbing away the drink from around his mouth and going, yes, this is a private affair. But yes, Odo's come to talk about the cause of Zek's death.
Yes.
And Krax pops up and asserts that it was caused by a massive infection of the tympanic membrane, which is a chronic condition. So Odo suggests that he'll ask Dr. Bashir to perform an autopsy, and all of the Ferengi start giggling and gesturing at the remains.
And we find out from Krax that when a Ferengi of his father's stature dies, the body is immediately vacuum desiccated and the remains are sold as memorabilia, which I think is the most wonderful bit of cultural creation I've ever seen.
And it also feels extremely capitalist, that idea of commodifying the body of the dead.
Incredible.
I mean, it reminded me of memorial diamonds, which I don't believe are often sold in kind of trade deals. I think particularly in America, cremains are often turned into diamonds, which people can then keep either in jewellery or in a box. I don't think we've yet known a celebrity death where those diamonds have been sold off.
God, not
but
as
we're
yet.
Probably not far off.
I was going to say, yeah. culture is anything to go by. We are not far off the Ferengi Alliance ourselves here on 21st Century
Precisely.
Earth.
But yeah, memorial diamonds only came about in very recent years, so they didn't exist yet. But it feels like one of these places where Star Trek has preempted something that our culture later comes up with. Yeah.
Absolutely. But I love it. I love it as a concept. It does just seem, again, as we've discussed previously, a comic exaggeration of capitalism. Like,
Yes.
as much as we hope it doesn't come true, it does seem like a comedy extrapolation.
It does, and there are nice little details, like when Odo is handed one of these little canisters, he carelessly tosses it back to Graal, who had given it to him. Just like you're throwing around these bits of a dude's dust. What the heck?
It is beautiful, and I love it. And can I just point out as well, an infection of the tympanic membrane, I think, is basically an ear infection. They're saying he died of an ear infection, which when you see Zek's enormous lobes, you can believe.
I didn't look that up, but yeah, that fits well. Everything's about the ears with these guys.
Exactly.
Well, the next scene is another very short one of Nog and Jake sitting on a balcony again. And unusually, there's no background sound in this. I don't know whether it was an error of omission by the production staff, because usually whenever someone is in any space aboard the ship, there is some noise. And if they're in a corridor, there are people passing by below. There's talk. You can hear the noises from the bar. In this scene, for whatever reason, you can hear the two actors' voices echoing in the space. Which suggests that they don't shoot to the floor below, it's just focused on them. So I wonder whether everyone else went for their lunch while these two actors did their scene. But yeah, it was just very unusual, because normally, as you've pointed out before, the soundscaping in this series is excellent. So it was just a very rare instance of a moment of silence aboard the station.
But it allows them to have a very serious, heartfelt conversation.
It does, and the two both say that their fathers claim that Ferengis and humans don't have much to talk about, but that doesn't mean that they're right.
Yeah.
I think it's in this scene where Jake says, well, we've always had things to talk about. And Jake asks if Nog wants to be friends again, and he just says, yes.
Yes. Simple as that. They get on.
Resolved very easily.
I love it. And it is that way of boiling down this kind of dispute to very simple, but I want to be your friend. And it's both of them make that conscious decision to reject the kind of ethos that their fathers are pushing, I loved it. I just loved it. It's such a simple, easy
it's very
scene,
wholesome.
but it is wholesome.
And in the next, let's see. Oh, the next thing, we're back in Quark's bar again. There's a surprise. Where Odo and Quark, and Odo is asking what it means for Quark to be Grand Nagus.
Yes.
I wrote down much of this conversation because it was a lovely little snippet of these two. And Quark says, it means that from now on, if you wish to speak to me, you must first make an appointment with Rom. And Odo says, don't be ludicrous. Quark says it is also customary to show respect by kissing my sceptre, and he holds it up at Odo's mouth height.
There it is.
Odo just snorts and walks away. But when Odo has walked away, Quark says, I suppose I could make an exception in your case.
Oh,
because they're besties. He's not going to push Odo away.
I think we discussed this during the watch we had together, and it was just that I noticed at the time that they both laugh. Like Odo has his typical grunt, laugh, shake head, walk off, and Quark also chuckles, and it's like they actually are enjoying this. They enjoy fencing with each other. They love it.
It does feel like there is an understanding between them. 100%. Neither of them is genuinely threatened by this change in status between them. They're going to persist no matter what.
100%. It more important than anything is the relationship between Quark and Odo and how they play off each other, and especially just the moment it was said, I just said, "Oh Lord." When Quark says, it's also customary for you to kiss my scepter, and he raises his tool in Odo's face. I mean, come on, people. Come on. Good Lord. What a scene.
Absolute filth.
Oh, I love it. I love it. So, yes, a great opportunity for Quark and Odo to bounce off each other. Love it.
And the next thing that happens is that Quark gets distracted by a shiny. He sees a coin rolling across the floor.
And I love that
as
Quark...
it stops rolling...
I love that Quark will stoop for change. Can I just say that I love... He will absolutely...
And it fits perfect. I think it was either the previous episode or the one before where he was going around the entire bar finding loose change on the floor.
It's amazing what people will drop.
Every bit of acquisition counts.
Yes. Love it. But yes, he does.
He stoops down to pick it up, and as he does so, a drone-like bomb in the background flies in his direction, explodes against a wall, coming at the direction where his head was a second ago. So later on, it then cuts, and later on in the bar, Sisko, O'Brien, and Odo are looking at the remains of the bomb, and O'Brien identifies it as a Ferengi locator bomb, which is designed to lock onto a target's pheromones. And as they leave the bar and walk into the corridor, Ben sees Nog and Jake happily running along the upper level, and he sighs wearily. Oh, dude, be happy for them.
But they're on the way to find out more from Quark. And I think, is this when Bashir turns up to say that he's given Quark a full checkup?
I don't think just yet.
Okay.
I've got that we're in Quark's course, and Quark is concerned that the station command's investigation of his attempted murder constitutes interfering in Ferengi affairs. And there's a beautifully shot moment when Quark and Sisko are on screen.
Yes.
Sisko says, "Now look here, Quark," and Ron pops his head into shot, smiles, and almost like it goes, Nagus, Quark, and then disappears again.
And Ben just looks down and gives him a shake of the head and looks back to Quark. Comedy
it's just so
gold.
Exactly, it's so perfectly framed and shot. The acting is perfect. It's utterly wonderful.
I think I pointed out as well, considering Quark's lying down and Rom comes up from below, presumably Rom was under Quark's bed. I just couldn't figure out. Like Rom was literally lurking like Gollum under Quark's
bed. So he could leap up and then down again.
Beautifully shot. Absolutely ludicrous. Very in keeping with the theme of the episode. Brilliant shot. Brilliant. And Sisko's reaction of just exasperated head-shaking Ferengi nonsense. Perfection. Absolutely perfection. Loved it as a scene. That one moment alone is brilliant. But yes, this is it. This is the discussion about the dangers. And Quark is not having it, doesn't want any interference. And Odo's trying to find out who may pose a threat. Who would benefit, and obviously the ultimate beneficiary would be Krax, as the Nagus' son. But Quark says, well, no, Krax was in the bar, so it couldn't have been him unless there was an apprentice.
Couldn't have been Growl, similarly.
Couldn't have been Growl, even though, as Rom clumsily points out, but Growl did threaten you. And Odo's like, what's this about a threat? Beautiful. Odo always on, always detecting crimes.
And Odo, he asks if all of Zek's associates were definitely at the funeral. Quark says yes, but what about his manservant, Maihardu? And Rom and Quark don't remember seeing Maihardu at the funeral, and Odo says that Hyperion servants are renowned for their devotion to their employers. It was very strange that Maihardu was not there.
And on that ominous note, I believe the scene comes to a close. I wonder if I may beg for a comfort break, Kat.
Absolutely.
The problem with a wine-driven podcast is occasionally I need to nip off. So I'm going to put us all on standby briefly, and we will return in a couple of minutes.
Awesome sauce.
Thank you.
See you soon.
Cheers. And welcome back to Deep Space Wine, a Star Trek podcast. We do need standby music. Thank you, Kat. Terribly sorry, everyone. Normally we don't have a problem having a full run through, but when you gotta go, you gotta go. So thank you, everyone. So we ended there on Odo noticing very tellingly that Mehar-Du was not at Zek's funeral. Ominous.
Highly suspicious. But the next scene is in Sisko and Jake's quarters, and Jake won't tell Sisko what he was getting up to with Nog when he stayed out late last night, that it's private. And Sisko, for the first time, I think, in the show, looks angry with Jake.
Yeah.
And then when Jake says that he's late for school and he's going to leave, Sisko replies, "I want you home in time for dinner. Is that understood?" And I think it's the first time he's given Jake a direct order
100%.
rather than asking him. So yeah, it feels like a bit of a low moment for Sisko in his relationship with Jake. That he usually doesn't take that tone, but he's reaching the end of his patience with these Nog shenanigans.
Yes, absolutely. And I think I also bumped on it a bit because it is, as you say, very out of character for Ben to be this firm with Jake. But I think also we've got to bear in mind that since the increase in Ferengi activity generally on the station, there's been a bomb attack.
Yes.
On his station. And I think that is triggering both his concerns as a commander of the station and as Jake's father.
That's a very
knowing
good point,
that his son is hanging around with Ferengi. So I think, and also at the end of the day, we've got to accept that Ben Sisko is not a perfect person. Nobody is a perfect person. He's going to sometimes overreact and be, my concern for you, I'm going to take responsibility, I'm going to make decisions for you as your father, even though Jake should be now trusted to make his own decisions. So I think it's just a believable humour moment to say, actually, you know what, I'm going to overrule you and tell you what you're going to do now. So whilst it's not a good look, it's a believable.
Absolutely. It doesn't feel completely out of character that happens at that moment.
I think there is context for what is ultimately, possibly an unpopular decision to kind of mandate what Jake's going to do.
Next scene. I'm not certain whether it happens in Quark's quarters or in an office that he's taken on.
Great
but
scene.
He's in an office.
You right?
Oh, yes, I'm good. But he is sitting behind a desk, and he's sitting behind a desk with a little pet.
Let me bring that up now. This is, yes. He has a little pet that he is fussing much in the way. I think when we watched the episode together, I said it was a bit like Salacious Crumb and Jabba.
Yes.
Exactly. But it's very much said in the background notes that this whole scene was shot very much as a reference to The Godfather.
It feels like a pastiche of The Godfather.
It 100% is, including blinds on a window into space. Which would
even spelled that, you're right.
There are actual blinds over a viewport into space, which would never be needed. Never, ever be needed. So I think Star Trek to this point has not done many kind of like shout outs or references beyond maybe like a holodeck episode, but this is what is considered normal behavior on the station, but it is such a vivid shout out to The Godfather, and this whole scene is a massive tribute to The Godfather, and I just think it's done wonderfully. And it starts out.
It feels perfectly in character as well as being very funny.
Doesn't it? But there's Quark, in his office, stroking his novelty pet.
Weird weevil thing.
And he is receiving supplication from, I think, is it Nava?
Yes,
one of the Ferengi associates who wants to introduce Synthehold to the Gamma Quadrant. And Quark says, were you happy when I was named Nagus?
Nava has to admit that no, he wasn't.
And did you come to your Nagus? Did you pledge your support to me?
No, Nagus.
And now you come to me asking for my favor, and it's just on the day of my daughter's wedding.
Nagus. But is it out of true friendship? No, you only pretend to show me respect, so I will grant you this immense opportunity. It's beautiful. He's chewing the scenery, he's enjoying every moment of it.
And he does it so well. And as you said earlier, it's in character. I'm sure the Ferengi would look on, the mob and that whole era with, admiration. That's how a culture should be.
I'm so glad there isn't an episode where Ferengi have created 1940s, 50s gun culture in America on a planet somewhere, so that there can be yet another Star Trek period America episode.
Yeah.
No, they don't. No.
So anyway, we're going to press on with the episode here, Kat.
Oh,
we're not going to get bogged down, and we're not going to have spoilers.
Oh my freaking god! Okay. Anyway, Nava says that he intends to split the opportunity with Quark 50-50, and Quark says, "Well, in that case, let's hope the Gamma Quadrant develops a taste for synthahol." And Nava is pleased and kisses the scepter on his way out. And then Quark says that the rest will have to come back tomorrow. All this benevolence wearies me. Oh, it's beautiful. It's just so hammed up, this entire scene.
It absolutely is. And he makes his way out the quarters. Before remembering he's forgotten to grab his scepter, swings around to Cracks and snaps it out, cracks his hand. Brilliant. Just a second of a physical comedy that just really just caps that scene wonderfully. He's out the door, and the door hasn't completely shut when Cracks taps Rom and says, "We need another plan."
Yeah, Cracks laments that if Quark keeps handing out these choice opportunities, he's going to become very popular. And it's Rom who says, "We'll have to come up with a new plan, something more reliable than a locator bomb, something that can't possibly fail to kill my dear brother." And I was like, oh my God.
That threw me as well.
No! But he's the nice, gentle, he's rather silly, incapable.
He's meant to be the anti-Quark.
Assassination attempt.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. Turns out you can push even the nicest people too far, and suddenly Rom is out to assassinate his brother. Brilliant.
Nah, but it's a twist I did not see coming.
No, absolutely. You would think it would be Cracks or one of the people on the Ferengi Council. So love it, and that's it. They cap the scene right there. Just they leave you to stew on that delicious moment over what would presumably have been an ad break on American telly.
Yes.
Brilliant. Absolutely unexpected development. Brilliantly delivered. And the next scene, we are back in Cisco's quarters, and it's the glove and it's the baseball, which has been a scene
throwing the ball up. And
American frustration since forever.
It is, yes.
Just and it's there's a chime at the door. Cisco says enter, and it's Dax. Cisco's go-to confidant on the station. The espouser of fine wisdom. And Dax comes in, saying she was going to invite him for a game of some alien chess.
Jakarian chess.
Incredible. Kat, once again, your recollection is tested.
My notes are far too extensive.
It works.
But yes, Cisco laments that Jake was supposed to be home half an hour ago when dinner was ready. So Dax kind of wanders up and goes, "Ooh, aubergine stew," and starts helping herself.
I fancy some aubergine stew now. It's consummation of aubergine stew.
It looks really good. It might have gone a bit cold, but it still looks really tasty. But yeah, Dax says that she's been a mother 3 times and a father twice. And Cisco asks, which was easier? And she says, well, I wasn't very successful either way.
And that surprises me because, so far we've learned that Dax, the symbiont, is very... very wise, and Ben Sisko himself looked up to Curzon as a mentor. So you think that surprises me that Dax would not consider her themselves a successful parent.
But at the same time, Curzon was a bit of a player. He liked the races. He liked the women, and I don't know what any of the previous incarnations of the Dax Trill were like. So it may have been that they are an excellent person to get on with other adults. Maybe they're not so good at making space for the children in their life.
That's a very good point, and I enjoy any opportunity to explore Trill culture and this lovely relaxed nature they have to. Yeah, I've been a father, I've been a mother, families. It's such a relaxed, amorphous approach to what we consider conventional family values these days. And especially in 93, I can imagine people just not
Oh,
being able
definitely. And it's lovely that the Earth person that she's talking with just takes it in stride and just out of curiosity asks, well, how was it? Which was easier. It's
Brilliant.
not taboo to talk about, and it's not something he'll avoid. It's really nice that it's just there and open.
I love any opportunity to explore that with Dax.
But yes, Dax says that given that she wasn't a successful parent in either role, that Sisko is welcome to take this with a pinch of salt, but she suggests finding Jake and bringing him here to eat his dinner. So Sisko then asks the computer where he is and heads off to Cargo Bay 14 and says, "Thanks, old man," and tosses the baseball to Dax, who catches it before helping herself to Aubergine stew.
I love that. Just a little.
She just sits down and fills a bowl.
Nobody else is eating it. I'm having it. And she's clearly, when she comes in, she says, "Oh, aubergine stew," and she's like, "Yeah, I'm going to have me some of that. You go sort out your son. I'm going to have me some dinner." Love it. Absolutely brilliant.
So Sisko walks in. He's walking towards the cargo bay. He goes through a couple of the nice big rolly cog doors.
Oh, I love them. Love those doors.
And he sees Jake and Nog at a bit of a distance. He sees them through some shelving. They don't see him. And Nog is reading very slowly, syllable by syllable. And Jake, at the end of the sentence, is laughing and telling him, "You've got it, you've got it." They're both so excited that Nog is learning how to read, and Jake is teaching him. And it's probably a bit of a stereotype, and it might be a bit patronizing towards Nog as a character. But it's nice. It is nicely played out. It fits for Jake as the kind, generous, and patient person that he is, 100%. That he wants to keep his friend in school so much that he will go through the difficulty of teaching him to read to get him there. Nog's desire to learn and his joy in doing so.
Yes.
Yeah.
It is a beautiful scene. I also like the fact that when Ben came into the cargo bay, he didn't immediately start stomping about. What's going on in here? Why are you hiding? He creeps up. I mean, partially it's because he's suspicious. He doesn't know what he's going to find. But it allows him to observe and not disturb that moment. He sees what's going on, he understands what's going on, and he leaves just as quietly as he came in. And
he doesn't emote at all. He doesn't give a big smile or like, "That's my boy." He just his face remains fairly impassive as he turns and walks away. So we're left being not entirely sure how he feels about that, just that he decided to leave them to it for now.
100%. And that to me is, as well, it's evidence of him trusting Jake. It's like, okay, you've set up this situation, I'm going to let you see it through. And it's good. It's tacit approval, which is great. I love it.
Yeah, and allowing Jake's autonomy to continue doing this good thing that he's started. But I did note that at this point it occurred to me that it was strange that even if Rom doesn't value reading, as a Ferengi, surely the writing of contracts, the reading of contracts, the Ferengi prints that we've heard referred to on 100%. Contracts, surely a large part of Ferengi culture must involve reading and writing in order to bamboozle others, if for no other reason.
Probably.
So that does feel a little bit strange. That again, you highlighted earlier that it feels a bit odd that Nog can't read. And it doesn't, I don't think it fits with Ferengi culture as a whole that would be the case, because I don't believe that every other Ferengi we've met is illiterate. It might be that Quark is a particular genius for it, but I don't think
never
it comes
been
from an illiterate culture. No.
So I wouldn't have thought so, no. Again, I wonder if this is a slight oversight on the writer's side, and they wanted to give, that accessible one person training another person. We have to start somewhere. Why not start with reading? And they've gone for that kind of slightly accessible preformed notion rather than thinking, well, actually, presumably, one, the guy has been at school for a few months, must know how to read, and two, the Ferengi clearly would value it as a skill. So let's chalk that up to a oversight, possibly.
It's a plot device which works within the episode, but
100%.
Doesn't necessarily sit well in the world as a whole.
An excellent summation. Thank you, Kat. I will absolutely agree with that. After Sisko leaves, we cut to a new scene, which is Rom strangling Quark, and Quark saying, "Are you trying to strangle me?"
And he's actually just trying to fix his shirt. It really looks like he's going for it, but he's really just trying to fasten his clothes, and Quark just construes it as him being very clumsy indeed. It's a nice, funny moment. And then Quark grabs Rom's ear harshly as he tells him to stop daydreaming. And it reminded me of it's a stereotype that I think comes from the 1950s and earlier of a parent grabbing their child by the ear when telling them off or pulling them somewhere. So yes, another use of the ear there.
Yeah, again, can I just flag ears erogenous?
Don't grab your brother's ear, Quark. That's not what nice Ferengi do.
Right, thank you. Again, I do feel like the writers have introduced a lovely concept, but they don't follow it uniformly. So
it could also be that for humans we have fairly precise areas that are considered erogenous. For Ferengi, the ears do have many uses, and that's kind of not top of the list in their everyday life, maybe.
Okay, yeah. I would like to believe that, certainly, rather than this is just a really weird interaction between brothers. So I'm going to go
for a very strange and off-putting kind of human analogy. French kissing. Humans often use their tongues when they're kissing. We also just stick out our tongues to be impolite to one another without any sexual connotation attached. So it is very possible that in Ferengi culture the ears encompass a lot of different things.
I like that. I'm going to take that on board 100%. I appreciate that. What's Nigel said? When the whole human school thing got mentioned, I thought it would have been clever for the Ferengi to attend to get the inside information on pesky humans, which was Keiko's argument to Rom when she was trying to recruit Nog to the school. It would mean none of the desired plot mechanisms will be put in place. So I can see what Nigel's saying, that they might have written themselves into a bit of a corner there by having the school introduced
we
so
could
soon.
see Nog as a kind of informer against the human school, but in this episode he is treated entirely as a willing student who's then kicked out
100%.
has to regain access to his education.
100%. But yes, well observed, Nigel. Thank you, man. So,
and in the scene that we're in, they are preparing to travel to the Gamma Quadrant, and Quark says that it's strange that Zek never mentioned having been there. So I think it's quite clear at that moment that Rom and Krax have come up with a ruse and lied about Zek having started up a business deal, which Quark now has to travel to close. Rom gives Quark one last chance in this scene before carrying out his plan.
Yes,
he says,
mentions
about
the bar again. Yeah.
You have so much and I have so little. And Quark finishes, which is exactly how it was meant to be.
It's horrendous.
He's just so oblivious to the needs of his poor brother.
Yep.
But Rom is now resolute and says, come, let's not keep our new partners waiting. And then there's a quick shot of Odo's in a busy place, which I think is probably the bar or a corridor, and he sees Mehadu going through a door in the background.
He's observing an airlock, so he's probably in a bar, I think, somewhere in the promenade, definitely.
And the next scene is Quark, Rom and Krax walking along a corridor, and Quark says that he was thinking of taking a Dabo girl along with them to increase his prestige and that first impression that they'll get of him. And the other two look genuinely distressed at the idea.
And we talked about this, and I liked your observation when we watched the first time.
I think watching it a second time to make notes, I think I feel a little less generously towards the characters. My first impression was maybe Rom and Krax are concerned that they don't want to have to kill the Dabo girl as well, because that is their plan for Quark. They're going to murder him.
100%.
What I actually suspect on a second viewing is that they didn't want to witness. A Dabo girl would have been either another person that they had to kill who would be missed, or they would have had to try and keep her quiet somehow. So I think it was just to reduce the number of people who could see what happens.
Sadly, that does seem more believable from a Ferengi point of view, doesn't it?
Yeah, but it did look for a moment as if they were just genuinely concerned and didn't want to harm another person while they're trying to kill off Quark. But sadly, I suspect not. And when Krax manages to persuade Quark that one look at your imposing features and the Stakorans will give us everything we ask for, and Quark is arrogant as heck and just takes this on face value, just like, of course, sure.
I noticed that as well, that if you are effusive in your praise, you can get round somebody like Quark very easily and actually override any survival instinct you might have had. You just praise him and he's like, oh yeah, you're right, I don't need anybody else, I'm glorious enough myself. And I'm like, are you really going to walk that blindly into an obvious trap? And the answer is 100% yes. So there you go.
Sick transit Tyrannus.
100%, that is exactly what's happening. I think at this point we nip back briefly. Mehadu goes through an airlock, shuts it, and Odo comes up to an open locked door, and according to my notes, he gloops through it.
I said squidges.
squidges, gloops. We're
Either
going to
way,
have
comes
many.
to a dildo, he melts himself down and
Yes.
reappears on the other side.
We're going to have many verbs for how Odo interacts with things.
I love that. Any opportunity for Odo to turn into a gloop and then recompose himself is brilliant. We need a lot more of it, but it was probably
100%.
very expensive to achieve.
I believe it was, and therefore I'm very grateful to the network for funding and DS9 to be, how can we turn Odo into something else this episode? Even if it's just a wibbly wibbly and then another wibbly wibbly. Brilliant, do it. And they do it, and it's great. And he's hot on the trail. He is the bloodhound. Love it.
Yeah. Proper detection going on there.
Mm-hmm.
The next scene is Rom, Krax, and Quark at the docking bay. Quark has entered the airlock and says, there must be some mistake. There's no ship docked here. Because of course, to enter the airlock and find an open door onto a ship. And no, the door's closed, space behind it.
Yep.
But he walks right up to the door and has a good peer through it, giving the others enough time to shut the other door behind him.
No survival instincts. Again.
And he starts to look a bit anxious as he says, what's wrong with you two? And then he starts banging on the glass panel of the door with his sceptre, shouting, you must obey your Nagus!
That is brilliant.
Just absolutely terrified and resorting to instructing them to let him go. At this point, he isn't bargaining with them. He isn't trying anything clever. It's just, I'm more important than you. Let me out.
Yeah, that is 100% what it is. And it's Krax, I think, who has the first line, which is, sorry, Nagus, afraid you've been voted out of office. And what I liked there was the implication that voting, because obviously you don't vote for an Nagus, so they're actually using democracy as a bit of a derogatory term.
I missed that.
It's really good to me, Yeah, they would actually be voting. You know a leader by the size of his lobes. you don't vote for them. So I do take that as a very sly dig at Federation democracy.
Nice bit of culture building there.
There we go.
And then the next thing that Quark does, he repeats the gesture that he made in the previous episode when he's appealing to the Waddy, as if his hands are in shackles, doing this and going, please!
Groveling. Quark is good at groveling.
I love the repeated use of that gesture. Armin Sherman has found that as his Quark is pleading gesture, and he repeats it. It's just a nice bit of continuity.
Beautiful.
I really appreciate.
It looks great. But this is it. He's saying, I'm your brother. You're not going to space me, are you? And I'm not sure what, but I've got here. Rom says, you threatened to throw me out of an airlock, didn't you? Well, now I'm going to do it to you.
Yeah, right at the top of the episode, when he gave that woman back her money pouch, Quark threatens to space him. And now how the tables have turned. And the next thing he says is, Roms, nice name for a bar, don't you think? He makes a good villain. I kind of like Rom like this. He's taken some power for himself and he's actually acting out. He's kind of following Krax, but it feels like he's acting out of initiative and he's being smart and funny and wicked. And I enjoy that he's doing that. It's a nice turn for the character.
Again, no spoilers for Cat, but Rom, like all characters in DS9, Bazaliev, gets an arc. He will flourish and grow into a complex character of his own. And we will say no more about that except to say, look forward.
Yes.
But yes, Rom's good name for a bar, isn't it? Oh, what a brilliant line.
And then Krax very politely asks Rom, would you like to do the honours or shall I? Which I think is partly just mechanical. It's pushing the plot along, saying, right, we're going to space him there, right? But it's nice that Krax, who wants to take on the Nagus role and has every reason to hate Quark and clearly disliked him from the moment he came aboard,
100%.
He's saying, no, I know this means more to you, Rom, as his brother. Do you want to kill him?
We're both going to get something out of this, 100%. It's that weird, politeness amongst thieves and villains, and it's great. And Rom is starting to lean towards the ominous big red button, which did make me think, even Cardassian stations presumably would have had some security to prevent people just getting...
There must be fail-safes. When there's no ship docked at the airlock, surely you can't...
Surely. No, there's just one flashing red light that presumably will eject Quark into space and kill him instantly.
Woo. But yes, Rom is delightfully slow in reaching up for the button. He's going to press it. He's going to press it. But then the Nagus appears behind
The
him.
Nagus? Zek himself?
Zek.
What did he say?
Pops up and says, "Release him!"
Release him. Brilliant, brilliant. Another perfect delivery.
And there's a great little cartoon of Cracks and Rom both saying, Nagus,
Nagus.
you're alive!
They
at
do
the
it
same
simultaneously. It's brilliant, isn't it? Oh, man.
And then Odo walks up from behind the Nagus and Mehadu and releases Quark from the airlock.
Yep.
And remarks, "It looks like you did need my help after all."
He's always got to have that little line, doesn't he?
White Knight popping up to save Quark.
And Quark comes out as well, and it's Quark, Cracks, and Rom all just being like, "But you died." And he didn't. As the Nagus explains, he went into you'll probably have the name.
A Dolbaji sleeping trance. Mehadu taught it to me. Which is kind of nice. He respects the culture of his different race servant and indeed learns something from him.
100% he does. And he says, "This was a test of you, Cracks, to see if you were ready to become Nagus. And you aren't."
He failed miserably.
That's it, sorry. Yes, 100%.
But yeah, I think we were both a bit surprised by that, because I would have thought that a power grab like trying to assassinate the current Grand Nagus to take power, from my knowledge of the Ferengi, that feels like a very Ferengi move. But Zek rationalizes it as, you don't grab power, you accumulate it quietly without anyone noticing. And he says that the bar was the key to it all, that with so many visitors on their way to and from the wormhole, what Zek expected was for Cracks to sit there quietly at his leisure, gathering up all the information he needed until the time was right. But instead he just dashed in and tried to kill off Quark immediately. And Zek has no respect for that.
Yeah, again, it is a little bit strange, and I wonder if the writers had to go through a few loops to be like, okay, how do we actually justify Zek preventing Quark being killed? Because obviously Zek doesn't really care about Quark. You know, he would have no reason to protect him or save his life. So there is this slightly convoluted idea that Cracks should have adopted Quark as a figurehead and run the Alliance from behind the scenes, as you say, gathering information from the bar. It is a little bit convoluted, a little bit strange, but...
It is, and I kind of suspect that Zek was genuinely planning to go on a holiday, because he was thinking, this is going to play out slowly. I'm just going to disappear off to Risa for a while, come back in a few months and see how Cracks is getting on.
100%.
But Cracks didn't give him time. It was just straight in there with the bombs and the death threats.
And that was presumably at the point at which Odo, off screen with Mehadu, was like, you can't let this happen. You know, if Quark dies, you know, I'm going to arrest and imprison your son for murder. So,
possibly, yes.
You better step in
and stopped it happening.
100%. So yeah, Zek is very...
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say there's a nice scene where the characters are all walking down a corridor and they're walking towards the camera. So the camera's moving backwards along the corridor while they approach us. And Zek hasn't been handed back the sceptre yet. Quark still has it. So Zek is holding on to Mehadu's arm. Just to kind of reiterate that he can't walk unaided. He uses the stuff for a reason. And when he doesn't have it, the actors have thought, well, yeah, I still need something. So Mehadu, poor tiny Ron, huge guy, leaning forward and taking some of the weight of Wallace Shawn on one of his arms. It's just beautiful, because it's not mentioned in the dialogue at all. It's just a piece of physical theatre that's happening as they walk along these interminable corridors with the camera people walking backwards. And again, a very technically difficult shot to get, which they took the trouble to do, because that's the look they wanted.
100%. And as you say, you know, you could have just assumed that people wouldn't think, oh, he would need his cane. But they've gone to the trouble of thinking, he needs his cane. If he doesn't have it, the fans will notice and be like, how did he walk so easily down that corridor?
It makes the world more real. It makes the character more...
Bingo.
Yeah, well, I suspect it probably was the cast who thought of it. Wallace Shawn thinking, well, this is what I've been doing with this character. I'm not going to change that now.
There's continuity. 100%. I'm also going to note that Nigel's pointing out in the chat that character arcs for even non-main cast is one of the reasons he loves DS9, and I'm going to echo that. It is. It is. I mean, you think that the Starfleet crew has taken a very secondary role in this episode.
Yeah, that's very true. And the day wasn't saved by a member of the Starfleet crew.
Precisely. This whole thing has been focused entirely on Quark and his Ferengi colleagues, relatives, all of that. They are the A cast. The B cast is the Starfleet crew. I think Bashir gets like one line, O'Brien 3, Dax 2, Kira 1. It's so focused on what we would consider the supporting cast, and yet they carry the A plot so brilliantly. So thank you, Nigel, for flagging up what I think is one of DS9's key skills. But we are running over. So I'm gonna encourage Kat to move us towards the end, please.
Yes, let's. Oh yeah, just as that scene ends, Zek instructs Krax to stop making excuses and go back to their ship because they'll be leaving shortly. And he ends with a very casual racism, just saying, it's like talking to a Klingon.
Again, casual space racism, as you so rightly point out. Oh, come on.
Ugh, lazy. But also probably right for that character. He probably didn't think very highly of the Klingons. But next, we're back at Quark's bar, and we start on a close-up shot of the sceptre head, the gold stick. Quark hands the sceptre back to the Nagus. And Zek remarks that it looks like he'll have to remain Nagus long enough to establish a Ferengi presence in the Gamma Quadrant, and that he'll let Quark know if he hears of any good Gamma Quadrant deals. And then Zek says that Quark has done a very profitable job with the bar. Who knows? Maybe one day I'll come back and buy it from you. And cackles in his high-pitched cackle, and that's a reference back to the start of the episode of what Quark was afraid would happen when the Nagus came aboard. So Quark is left once again fearing that someday his bar is going to be taken from him. The Nagus and Mehadu then walk away. Quark doesn't look around when Rom walks up behind him, but starts talking. So, Rom, you were going to toss me out an airlock.
Forgive me, brother.
And Quark replies, forgive you? Why, brother, I didn't think you had the lobes.
Yes, it is.
Wonderful treachery deserves a reward. It is again.
And he's going to make him assistant manager for customer service and policy.
Policy and clientele.
Policy and clientele.
And Nog asked what that means, and Quark says, how should I know? I just made it up. Let's go get a drink.
Brilliant. Brilliant.
I love that he rewards his brother for trying to assassinate him because it fits with his values.
And it caps this great deep dive into kind of Ferengi culture. And it's like, yeah, actually that works. And it occurs to me suddenly that it's kind of like a weird mirror of Klingon culture. I think there was a TNG episode where Riker has officer exchange on a Klingon ship. And he takes command of the ship by basically beating up its captain. So it's like a weird reflection. If you're willing enough to assassinate your boss to get his bar, is that not a
that
similar...
shows that you are sufficient to be,
you
to
have
be
the
trusted with
lobes.
important jobs. You got the lobes to do it.
Exactly. So I wonder if it's a weird reflection of that advancement by filling, a dead man's shoes, or in this case, occupying a dead man's lobes. I guess. I don't know. That's
a very good point, yes.
But great, and it's lovely. It's actually touching that what could have been a rift between these two because of their culture is actually a warm moment of them pulling together.
Yeah. And the final scene, elsewhere on the promenade, Nog and Jake are approaching a vendor selling what look like meat lollipops.
Jumja, it's called Jumja.
Oh my god, there's a name for it.
It's Bajoran confectionery. In the show, it's called Jumja. The cast themselves, as a behind the scenes tidbit, call it glop on a stick.
Dude, that's lovely. God damn.
Exactly. So yes, they are buying Jumja, or as we would know it, glop on a stick.
On a stick.
But it's Jake and Nog, and they have a wonderful... I love this scene. Please, Kat.
I think I've got conflicted feelings about it because they buy the Jumja. They're talking about what Nog's next lesson is going to be, and then they both turn to watch a woman walk by, and she's wearing exactly the same kind of bodysuit that everybody frickin' wears, but she's wiggling her hips a little bit.
Yeah, okay.
It's because she's being sexy. So they both watch her go because they're teenage boys, and they want to watch the woman's ass go by. I'm not sure whether I disapprove of them or disapprove of the writers for shoving that in, but either way, guys, really.
I think that is another very 90s sitcom trope, you know, that they may be guys from different culture, but there's one thing that unites guys, even from alien cultures. Butts. Also, it was a Vulcan woman as well.
I didn't notice that. I was obviously focusing too much on her butt.
Well, Kat, maybe you.
Yeah, maybe I have things to learn about respecting other cultures and not staring at their asses. Thank you, Tim.
Listen, I am not the Federation. I am not the morality police. I am just going to note that it's interesting that they would make it a Vulcan because it caps the very start of the episode when Nog claims that his homework was stolen by a Vulcan at the bar. And now
you're right.
We're back to ogling a Vulcan.
Disrespecting Vulcans in an entirely different way.
Exactly, 100%. A culture that would not normally go out of its way to be alluring. Especially
I can't imagine a Vulcan Jessica Rabbit, but this woman's doing her best.
My God, what a concept. What a concept. But listen, we don't know everything about Ponfar, do we? So, there is time enough to discover. But I would say, yes.
While they're looking at this woman's ass, Sisko approaches from a different direction and calls to Jake. And Jake wanders over to him, and Sisko says he was waiting for him and gives him a big hug and then kisses him on the forehead. And Jake's like, Dad.
I love that.
It's really sweet. I do love the physicality between the two actors, that Sisko quite frequently kisses Jake on the forehead and will hug him close.
Yeah.
It's a lovely father-son relationship, and it's quite a rare depiction of one on TV, especially in the 90s.
Especially. Yeah. And it's just capped beautifully by saying, you're a good kid, and go be with your friend.
Yeah, he says, you're a great boy, you know that.
That's it, yes. It's brilliant. And then he realizes that, if he shouldn't be worried about about Nog's influence on Jake, he should be proud of Jake's influence on Nog.
Yes, heck yeah, very well put.
It's the writers. The writers laid it out so beautifully. We could take it away, and there it is. There it is. And I wonder if that sums up the whole episode. That we need to look beyond these kind of cultural norms that are instilled on us, these accepted inherited biases, and actually go, we're all individuals, and, we're in this cultural melting pot where anything could happen. Let's embrace that. Also, carry out your plans secretly in the shadows without other people knowing. Teaching your friend to read or overthrowing the Grand Nagus, always secrecy. That's what I'm learning. That is some good calculated Ferengi thinking, Kat. Commendable. You would make an excellent Nagus. Cultural learnings from Ferengar. So I think it's safe to say that we both enjoyed this episode. We did. And just before we end, I'm just going to note that I didn't have a favourite quote per se, but I made a little list of some of the many uses of references to ears in the episode. Just, he has the ears, meaning business acumen or instinct. You call someone a tiny-eared fool as an insult, a lobeless amateur. One of the Ferengi waiting for the Nagus to show up says, he'd better show his ears soon or I'm leaving. So ears are synecdoche for the whole person. And then having the lobes, meaning having the courage, which we would probably have. Whether he has the balls to do something, they have the lobes. But yeah, I liked that. Yeah, I really enjoyed the episode. As you say, it had some lovely themes about family and cultural integration and power and how one gets it. And among a great deal of comedy and really nice portrayals of characters. And the Ferengi characters were nicely differentiated. They aren't all the same, and they don't all have the same ideas and ideals. Which I think is sometimes a bit of a Star Trek falling ground, the as TV tropes put it, the planet of hats, where everybody from one world wears that one hat. Yes, no such thing as different countries and different languages or cultures within a world, even though that's exactly what Earth is like. No, every Klingon will be warlike, every Ferengi will be acquisitive. Yeah. And the implication as well that these races don't even live on one planet. The Klingon Empire, the Romulan Empire, they are huge alliances, and yet we are meant to believe some very inflated tropes of them. So Yeah,
I
once
think A
again,
Strange New World has started to undo that a little bit. Whenever
Yes.
her is investigating dialects, she will talk about different dialects within a language.
it's good.
So I think the world of Star Trek is starting to integrate that idea about greater diversity within a single group. But it takes a while.
It does. It does. And it starts, I think, with a show like DS9, trying to explore these different concepts, and hopefully it will do it in later episodes. We have officially, I think, gone our longest in discussing an episode at 2 hours 26 minutes.
Every time I think this is going to be it, this is going to be a short one. This
We'll
is going
get
to go
through
an hour to an hour and a half, and
It'll be
then
it's never not. It never
maybe
is.
when we finally hit an episode that I don't like, and I'm just like, no notes for this, hated it. Maybe then we'll have a 5-minute episode.
I think when we hit an episode you don't like, you'll have even more notes than ever. That's my prediction. You heard it here first, chat. When Kat hits an episode they don't like, it's going to be murder.
I am an accomplished hater.
So I will let us all go. Thank you very much, everyone, for tuning in. Much appreciated. We shall hopefully be back in a couple of weeks' time.
Yes, I think our 2 ensigns were absent today. I don't think I've seen them pop up in the chat. So they'll hopefully be here next time.
It would be lovely to have them. It would be lovely to have them. So that was the Nagus, episode 10, season 1. Episode 11 is The Vortex. I only know the title. I've not looked any more into it. And we will hopefully cover that next time here on Deep Space Wine. So thank you so much, Kat, as always, for your pleasure and company. Take care, everyone.
Thank you, Tim.
See you later.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.